We are doing a one rev intercept to the plus R bar, which is different than STS-92 because the station is in a different configuration. We will be intercepting the plus R bar and then tracking along it. The station will be in an XVV, or X-axis to the velocity vector attitude for the docking. As we approach, we will do a 180-degree yaw maneuver to put us in the correct clocking for mating to PMA-3. Then the crew will slowly approach and attach to PMA-3. Mark Garneau will start maneuvering P6 as the crew is going out the door to a pre-installed position about 3 feet above the Z1 attach point. He will maneuver it over P6, over Z1. The crew, in the meantime, will be positioning themselves on Z1, where they will be on opposite sides of Z1 and can see across the interface and give cues to Mark Garneau as to ready for latch indication.
This describes the process Bill was going through with you of rotating these beta gimbals outward. It's on what we call a 4-bar linkage. Once those things are released, the system can't be restowed in the cargo bay. So that's kind of the point of no return from a return of the P6 point of view. They then swing the blanket boxes out, and from the cabin, the command will be sent to deploy the wings. While the animation shows simultaneous, we'll be doing these one at a time. There's actually several latches and restraints that have to be released to enable this deployment. It's quite an amazing piece of engineering. These masts, we've flown them on several other flights, including most recently the SRTM mission. These masts are on the order of 100 feet long.
That array will supply enough power for 40 average homes at the array level. These arrays here, you see some of them are assembled and some of them aren't. This is pictures taken out at Lockheed in Mountain View, California. They're getting ready to, actually over in this particular test, they were testing the structure. You can see the arrays mounted to a Kapton structure here. And those Kaptons, each section, there's 82 vertical sections, and each section carries 5 of these array assemblies. The mast that we're seeing here is housed in a mast container, or a mast canister. That canister is 4 feet in diameter and 7.5 feet long. And you see the arrays coming out. The structure of those arrays, their battens are kind of in series. One set of battens is a flexible fiberglass, and the next set of battens is a stainless steel rigid batten. And as the inside of that canister rotates, the mast begins to unfold, and that mast will extend 110 feet, pulling out 2 arrays with it. That is driven by that structure is mounted on the beta gimbal assembly.
We will be undocking again in the XVV attitude on the plus R bar. Once we get separation, the vehicle will start a fly around at around 400 feet, 400 to 600 feet. We'll do the fly around. There we go. And then we have one more task to do. Once we just pass the negative R bar, we'll do a slight pitch maneuver to point the IMAX camera in the payload bay at the station with the deployed arrays, with the Earth in the background. And we are setting up undocking so that we have the proper lighting for this photo. We'll complete the fly around down to the plus R bar and do final separation, and then we will leave the vicinity of the station. And then prepare for stowing everything.
This is a shuttle crew with some real juice. The 5-man, all-veteran Endeavour team plans to carry and connect the first big power plant for the budding, yet amperage-thirsty International Space Station. They are led by a commander named Jet. No kidding.
I mean, we're really trying to light up the station. We're trying to give them the power they need to continue the assembly sequence, but also really to fully support the crew that's up there now.
That three-man station-keeping crew, NASA astronaut Bill Shepard and Russian cosmonauts Yuri Gidzenko and Sergei Krikalev, will no doubt marvel at the sight as the $600 million solar arrays are plucked out of Endeavour's cargo bay, bolted onto the station, and then unfurled.
Well, when this mission is complete, suddenly people are going to realize that this is a very big station.
The solar arrays will span 249 feet, the longest structures ever to leave the planet, making the space station the third brightest object in the sky, behind the moon and the star Sirius. Astronauts Joe Tanner and Carlos Noriega are slated for 3 spacewalks, first and foremost to ensure the arrays are latched on properly.
You know, if we can't do that, then we either got to bring it home or throw it away, and we don't want to do either one of those.
If all goes well, the spacewalkers also plan to plug the arrays into the station's power grid, bringing good things and more elbow room to life for a crew so far shut out of the U.S. side of the station for lack of power to turn on the heat.
If we don't do this mission, we don't do the next mission. And if we don't do this stuff right, there's a slight chance that Shep and his crew may come home.
NASA, the Russians, and the 14 other nations building this $100 billion perch over the planet are loath to consider vacating the premises now, just 1 month after the lights went on and humans started calling it home.
The White House symbolizes an idea, elected government, orderly transfer of power. But it started in good old-fashioned politics. George Washington, the one president who never lived in it, picked the architect, James Hoban. Sure, they had a contest, but Washington picked Hoban before the competition even started. And the house would be stone. Lots of people wanted brick, not Washington. They lost the cornerstone, a fair amount of drinking during the cornerstone laying ceremony in 1792, and doubts ever since. Is it at one of the corners? Did some partygoers toss it into the river? Historians aren't sure. When John Adams moved in, the plaster was still wet and only 6 rooms were ready. His wife hung his laundry in what's now the East Room so visitors wouldn't see presidential underwear on a line in the yard. Thomas Jefferson got rid of the outdoor latrine and added east and west wings, versions of which are there still. The British burned the place in 1814. Dolly Madison, then First Lady, fled with Gilbert Stuart's portrait of Washington, which hangs in the White House to this day. Running water arrived in 1833, central heating 2 years later, and it's been redone and rebuilt over the years. Harry Truman did a major restoration after one leg of his daughter's piano poked through the floor. And Truman added this balcony, which outraged some, but does offer one of the best views of the mall in all of Washington. Most of all, the place endured. Survived the Civil War, survived normal transitions. Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower didn't much like each other, but power passed smoothly. Survived tragic transitions, Jacqueline Kennedy and the children moving out, Lyndon Johnson and his family moving in. It survived wars and demonstrations. Johnson could listen to anti-Vietnam War protesters chant, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" And you wonder how that made him feel. It survived Richard Nixon's resignation, something the country had never seen before. It is a home and an office and a shrine. Thousands of visitors troop through it every year. And it is something more, even now with the street in front of it closed because of worries it might be attacked. It says to Americans and anyone else who listens, power can pass peacefully from party to party, man to man. This system, for all its imperfections, works, has worked for more than 200 years. They'll be getting ready for new tenants soon now, but the things this building stands for will not change. Bruce Morton, CNN, Washington.
And for your information, we have a new president of the United States. Would you like to take a guess who it is?
Yeah, please.
The new president of the United States is George W. Bush.
Well, my congratulations. That's great. Maybe we'll get to talk to him.
It may be so. Well, first, Alpha, I had made a statement earlier about the new president of the United States, and I must retract that statement. The networks have since retracted that, and the vote is very close. In fact, Florida is the swing vote, so we do not know at this time who the president of the United States will be.
Okay, we copy. Thanks for the heads.
Millionen Dollar kosteten die Kampagnen von George W. Bush und Al Gore. Spätestens am Mittwoch hätte eigentlich feststellen sollen, wer von den beiden von Januar 2001 an Präsident der Weltmacht USA sein wird. Nun aber zeigt sich, dass das vor mehr als 200 Jahren eingeführte System, Wahlmänner zwischen das Votum stimmberechtigter Bürger und der endgültigen Entscheidung zu schalten, zu einer absurd anmutenden Situation führen kann. Alles hängt davon ab, wem die 25 Wahlmännerstimmen des US-Bundesstaates Florida zugesprochen werden. Dort hatte eine Nachzählung ergeben, dass in Wahllokalen Stimmen falsch zugeordnet worden waren.
Nach einem furiosen Wahlkampfmarathon glaubten sich die Kontrahenten endlich im Ziel. George W. Bush, Gouverneur von Texas, und Al Gore, der Vizepräsident. Was niemand ahnte, jetzt sollte der Krimi erst richtig losgehen. Die Schlacht wird im Wackelstaat Florida geschlagen, hatten Experten prophezeit. Stimmt. Mal führt in der Wahlnacht Gore im Sonnenstaat, mal Bush. Dann scheint die Entscheidung gefallen für den Texaner.
George Bush, Governor of Texas, will become the 43rd President of the United States. Bush wins.
Am frühen Morgen kürt das Fernsehen vorschnell Bush zum Präsidenten. Jubel in Austin, Texas. Bestürzung im Lager Gores. Schon wenig später bekommt Bush von seinem Konkurrenten einen Gratulationsanruf. Da platzt aus Florida die Nachricht herein, das Präsidentschaftsrennen sei wieder offen. Gore hat sich noch herangekämpft. Schließlich trennen ihn nur noch 1784 Stimmen von Bush. Das hat Folgen in Florida. Weil der Abstand weniger als 0,5% beträgt, muss nach dem Gesetz nochmal ausgezählt werden. Das politische Tauziehen um eine Handvoll Wählerstimmen beginnt. Beide Seiten bleiben hart. Bush ist sich sicher, dass die Neuauszählung das vorherige Ergebnis bestätigen und er der neue Präsident sein wird. Gore spielt auf Zeit. Er glaubt, in Florida sei nicht alles mit rechten Dingen zugegangen und er sei um seinen Sieg betrogen worden. So verlangen Gores Anhänger eine Neuwahl im Landkreis Palm Beach County. Hier erhitzen sich die Gemüter an 19.000 ungültigen Stimmen. Wähler hatten für den falschen oder für zwei Kandidaten gestimmt, weil sie durch die Gestaltung des Wahlzettels irritiert waren und ihn verkehrt lochten. Ich habe bis zum Abend nicht gewusst, wen ich da eigentlich gewählt habe. Der Bush-Gesandte James Baker will eine dritte Auszählung von Hand in einigen Landkreisen gerichtlich stoppen lassen. Er fürchtet Manipulationen. Menschliches Versagen und Parteilichkeit würden so an die Stelle präziser Maschinen treten. Jetzt jedoch, wo das Hickhack um den neuen Präsidenten die Gerichte erreicht, droht der Prozess außer Kontrolle zu geraten und damit eine Verfassungskrise. Nicht vollständig ausgezählt ist die Briefwahl. Letzte Sendungen werden am Freitag erwartet. Auch das Rennen in Wisconsin, Iowa, Oregon und New Mexico ist wieder offen. Im schlimmsten Fall drohen auch hier Neuzählungen. Beide Kandidaten wirken trotz der Pattsituation äußerlich gelassen. Al Gore spielt Football und George W. Bush geht auf seinem Landsitz in Texas spazieren und spielt mit dem Hund.
Republikaner haben bei einem Gericht in Florida gegen die von den Demokraten geforderte erneute Nachzählung der Stimmen geklagt. Die Nachzählung von Hans berge die Gefahr der Manipulation und menschlicher Irrtümer, so ein Sprecher der Republikaner. Die Demokraten wiesen diese Bedenken umgehend zurück. Das Wahlgesetz von Florida sehe Zählungen per Hand in Zweifelsfällen vor, so die Argumentation des Gore-Lagers. Am Montag soll nun ein Bundesrichter in Miami über die Streitfrage entscheiden.
Mit dem Wahlausgang in Amerika sollte der neue US-Präsident feststehen. Doch die Wahl nahm einen historischen Verlauf. Bis heute gibt es keinen Gewinner. Zu knapp war das Ergebnis zwischen Al Gore und George W. Bush. Bis klar ist, wer nach Bill Clinton ins Weiße Haus einzieht, können noch Wochen vergehen. Der Wochenrückblick jetzt von Stefanie von Draten.
Historisches Unentschieden in den USA. Das erste Mal in der Geschichte der Vereinigten Staaten wird direkt nach der Wahl keiner der beiden Kandidaten zum zukünftigen Präsidenten ausgerufen. Der Demokrat Al Gore liegt zwar vorn, aber erst die Stimmen der 25 Wahlmänner aus Florida entscheiden, wer ins Weiße Haus einziehen wird. Bei der ersten Auszählung führt der Republikaner George W. Bush hier mit knapp 2000 Stimmen. Es wird aber ein zweites, in einigen Distrikten ein drittes Mal gezählt. Bushs Vorsprung schrumpft auf knapp 300 Stimmen, sodass die Briefwähler aus Übersee ausschlaggebend für das Endergebnis der Präsidentenwahl werden könnten. Das wird nicht vor Ende kommender Woche erwartet.
Wenn George Washington demnächst von seinem Denkmalspferd stiege, dann würde wohl auch das keinen mehr wundern, in Zeiten, die sich am ehesten mit politischem Tumult umschreiben lassen. Die USA starren gebannt auf ein paar Löcher in Floridas veralteten Maschinenwahlzetteln, denn die werden entscheiden, wer ins Weiße Haus einzieht. Der letzte Stand im Nachzähldrama ohne Gewehr, die Lage ändert sich stündlich. Das Endergebnis allerdings noch ohne die Briefwähler aus Übersee ist verkündet und Bush liegt vorn mit nur 300 Stimmen. Floridas Innenministerin Catherine Harris, eine Republikanerin, will vom obersten Gerichtshof alle weiteren Handnachzählungen stoppen lassen, was Gore sofort mit einer Gegenklage kontern ließ. Jeder in Florida hat das Recht, dass seine Stimme gezählt wird. Das Bush-Lager versucht, ihnen dieses Recht zu nehmen, sagt Gore-Sprecher Bill Daley. Die Handzählungen in 4 demokratischen Hochburgen nämlich sind Gores letzte Siegeschance. Der Bezirk West Palm Beach hat sich vor Gericht das Recht auf Handzählung erstritten. Doch das werden die Republikaner wohl sofort wieder anfechten. Diese Bezirke wollen das Wahlergebnis auf höchst subjektive Weise neu erfinden, sagt Bush-Sprecherin Karen Hughes. Machen wir uns zum Narren in der Welt, fragen sich unterdessen immer mehr Amerikaner. Man zankt, wie ein Stanzloch aussehen muss, damit es als Stimme gilt. Und in Milwaukee erzählen Studenten stolz, wie leicht es war, mehrfach zu wählen. 4-mal bin ich an diesem Tag zur Wahlurne gegangen, sagt er. Wann wird der Sieger feststehen, am Wochenende oder später? Keiner weiß es angesichts dieses Riesendurcheinanders.
Close, but no cigar for a French daredevil known for his landing his paraglider on the Eiffel Tower. This time, Terry Doe tried to set down on the torch of New York's Statue of Liberty. The statue was originally a gift from France to the US, but Lady Liberty snubbed the fellow Frenchman, who was forced to land in nearby New Jersey instead.
That's where the command post will be set up for the presidential inauguration.
Despite the lack of a new commander-in-chief, the Armed Forces Inaugural Committee is already on duty.
And early in the morning, what we'll do is we'll rehearse the swearing-in ceremony and the parade.
Training drivers, readying military bands, honor guards, trumpets, so there will be plenty of pomp despite the circumstances.
As far as the military is concerned, we will have an inauguration one way or the other on January 20th, and we, the military, will be able to support whatever they want us to do.
And inaugural planners on Capitol Hill are pressing forward.
Fortunately, most of the printed materials that we distribute, including the 200,000 tickets and invitations and maps of the Capitol grounds and all that, are generic.
But without a president-elect, there is no inaugural committee to plan the balls, the parade, the galas.
What you can't do is begin to put together the themes, the message that you want your inauguration to convey to people.
It's no laughing matter for those who bring the themes to life. Idle workers at this exhibit company draft car ads instead of polishing up Texas-sized boots.
I think if it goes beyond December 1st, I think that there'll be a lot of scaled-down things. I mean, you're losing, what, almost 3 weeks?
At Soros Tuxedo Rental, they're on pins and needles waiting for a winner.
Here we are, November 18th, and I have yet to place an order. And to be very honest with you about it, I'm very cautious about placing an order until this thing is resolved.
Even Lone Star accessories are on hold.
These are special made. Again, wait on this, they told me until January 4th. So I'm hoping that, you know.
You'll know something by then.
Well before that. I hope we all know, that's right.
Whatever happens, the inaugural show must go on, and eventually there will be a host, even if half the guests are in no mood to celebrate. Kathleen Koch for CNN, Washington.
It's a strangely peaceful, reassuring world, the wheat fields of America. Hard even to imagine that the most destructive weapons in history are hidden away under these farms.
How big is this base? You're talking about for all the missiles, where all the missiles are at? There's 12,000 square miles.
It's kind of the size of a small state, isn't it?
That's correct.
And right now, at Warren Air Force Base, biggest ICBM base in the United States, it's really business as usual as it was during the Cold War on some level.
Without question, we do business as usual, just like you said, and nothing has changed.
Colonel Stacker, sorry to interrupt. The launch facility is at 12 o'clock, approximately 3.5 miles.
This is the entrance to a nuclear launch control center. It's designed to look perfectly innocuous. 55 identical facilities like this one are spread all across the American West.
Watch your head, your step.
And in every one of them, 2 young launch officers, missileers as they call themselves, serving on combat alert.
Lieutenant Namath and Lieutenant Del Toro. How old are you?
25.
And how long have you been a missileer?
For a year now.
Is there ever any question in your mind that you would be willing to launch one of these ICBMs?
Well, that's why we're here. I mean, if there were any doubt in any of our minds that we wouldn't do it, then we wouldn't be here.
We signed up knowing that whatever it takes to protect our country, we will do, and no second guessing whatsoever.
10 Minutemen intercontinental ballistic missiles, poised and ready to launch in minutes. And everywhere we went, that was the message of the missileers.
If it comes down to us having to launch a missile, then I'm sure that it's definitely necessary for us to do that to defend our country, and I will do that.
Do you think that it's possible that most Americans have forgotten that you're down there on alert?
They have. I'm sure they have.
They have what?
Forgotten. There's a lot of Americans that don't realize that we're still pulling alerts 24/7. Every single day we're down there defending this country.
Now, isn't that strange?
Actually, I think that's kind of reassuring because we do our job so well that they can put it behind them and say, hey, we're safe tonight to sleep.
Safe, they say, because while America sleeps, they're standing guard, prepared to launch.
I think the question is what makes them do it? What makes them go down into that silo for a 24-hour? But it's kind of like what makes a submariner go undersea for 70 days at a time.
And more important, what makes them ultimately willing to follow through and execute the launch of weapons that would result in really the destruction, death of millions?
It's just a duty, a mission that we're called upon to do to react to presidential orders. Being a civilian, I guess it would be hard to kind of comprehend that, but that's why we feel that no country would ever do that to ours.
For most Americans, those missileers simply don't exist. This is the 21st century, and America is on top. The world's lone superpower. Music, sports, billionaires, IPOs. It's all happening here, and nothing seems big or menacing enough to stop it. About the last thing on anyone's mind is the idea that we may be just minutes from doomsday. Up here in space, America is king. Most of these commercial satellites were born in the USA. But the real power in space belongs to the satellites you never see. Look carefully at this one. It's ready to signal the launch of a nuclear attack. It's part of an elaborate network of military satellites that were built to spy on the Soviet Union. And today, nearly a decade after the end of the Cold War, Russia is still their primary target. This is what they are looking at, Russia's nuclear empire. And this is what they were built to spot. A Russian ICBM launch. Check your watches. From the time this missile leaves its silo, it's 30 minutes until it could hit the United States of America.
A missile launch from, say, Russia would be detected within seconds.
General Chuck Horner is best known as the mastermind of the Allied air campaign during the 1991 Gulf War.
There it goes.
But from 1992 to 1994, General Horner commanded this mysterious facility, built to warn America about the one threat it has no defense against, nuclear weapons.
We have no ballistic missile defenses.
So if a missile comes in, there's nothing to be done about it.
Duck.
NORAD. It's America's early warning center, buried deep underneath Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado.
Cheyenne Mountain is a very interesting place. You drive in this huge tunnel, and when you get about half a mile or so down the road, 2 huge blast doors are there. And you suddenly come upon a steel building, not unlike a ship, if you will, housed in this huge cavity in the mountain. The building itself sits on these giant springs. And the idea of those springs is when a nuclear detonation occurs and shakes the whole mountain, the building will be able to resist this shock and won't be destroyed.
And the moment a missile launch is detected here, a countdown begins because they only have minutes to confirm if the rocket is coming their way. You only have, what, 3 minutes to make a determination as to whether or not the information indicates an attack.
We talk about 3 minutes to provide the president with a characterization of an attack on North America.
Not much time.
Very quick.
Just 3 minutes. That's why the early warning commander is not the man with his finger on the nuclear trigger.
The beauty of the system we have is you do not have the person that cries the attack is coming be the same person with their finger on the trigger. There's no doubt about it. You want your commander of NORAD, the guy who warns of attack, to err on the side of caution. On the other hand, since you want to have good deterrence based on threat, then the commander of strategic forces has to be very aggressive, has to be a person who is out in the world with great enthusiasm.
Four-star General Eugene Habiger was one of those men with his finger on the trigger. He was America's nuclear commander until 1998.
The only time I ever thought I'd see Moscow from the air was in a B-52 at 300 feet, getting ready to drop a nuclear weapon.
From here, General Habiger headed the U.S. Strategic Command, in charge of all of America's nuclear forces. Land, sea, and air. Stratcom's mission, unchanged since the height of the Cold War, to stand ready within minutes to retaliate massively.
People assume when the Cold War was over, nuclear weapons went away. They have not. There's only one thing that can destroy the United States of America as we know it today, and that's those Russian nuclear warheads.
30 minutes as a missile flies. Russia's hidden nuclear empire, intact to this day. It stretches across 11 time zones. A network of secret cities and bases that appear on no map. Thousands of nuclear warheads still on full combat alert.
The loser didn't lose, and the loser doesn't think he lost, and the loser is not acting like he lost, and has not acted like he lost since 1991.
At the end of the Cold War, both sides quickly cut their arsenals from about 10,000 warheads to 6,000 each. It appeared that the old nuclear face-off was coming to a close. But since then, in spite of years of negotiations, no further reductions have been implemented. Undersecretary of Defense Walter Slocum is the man who watches over U.S. nuclear policy. Why does the United States today still need thousands of nuclear warheads when the Cold War has been over for so long?
Because we think it's important to have a hedge against the possibility of problems in the future.
What does that mean, a hedge?
We cannot be absolutely certain of the course of the political power and policies in Russia, and therefore one of the reasons we maintain nuclear weapons is to have a hedge against the possibility of a serious deterioration in U.S.-Russian relations.
And this is the threat that men like Undersecretary Slocum feel they need to counter. It's Russia's newest intercontinental ballistic missile, the Topol-M, and it's moving here through the woods of Russia on full combat alert. So this green truck, or that missile, can take out any target.
Without even saying practically, every target on the globe.
That's New York, Los Angeles, Boston,
Это вот Нью-Йорк,
Chicago,
Лос-Анджелес,
in 30
Бостон,
minutes.
Чикаго, 30 минут и все.
Kommandozentrale des amerikanischen Militärs. 9. November 1979. Morgens um 10 vor 9 melden die Radarsysteme hunderte sowjetische Atomraketen im Anflug auf die USA. Drei Minuten bleiben, bevor das Undenkbare wahr wird. Aus dem Kalten Krieg wird der Dritte Weltkrieg. B-52-Bomber machen sich bereit zum atomaren Gegenschlag. Dann der erlösende Anruf. Der Radar irrt, keine sowjetischen Raketen. Die beste Computeranlage der Welt ist Opfer eines Fehlalarms. Versehentlich war ein Testprogramm gestartet worden. Der Kalte Krieg ist vorbei. Mauer und Lenin sind gefallen. Irdische Feindbilder verblasst. Neue hier oben erschienen. Weltraummüll, Satelliten oder Raumfähren. Deshalb warten in der Kommandozentrale der USA die Militärs weiterhin auf den Tag X. Willkommen in Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado, dem sichersten Platz der Erde, geschützt durch 2000 Meter dicken Granit. Die Kommandozentrale, eine Stadt im Berg, mit Straßen und Kreuzungen auf 3 Etagen. 1500 Menschen arbeiten hier. Sie sollen Amerika verteidigen. Vor was? Steht in den Sternen. Deshalb beobachten sie den Himmel. Pausenlos, lückenlos. Hier im Hauptquartier der North American Aerospace Defense, kurz NORAD. Die Instrumente erfassen daumengroße Objekte bis zu einer Höhe von 1000 Kilometern. Können Sie ein Objekt nicht identifizieren, setzt sich eine gewaltige Abwehrmaschinerie in Gang, um das unbekannte Flugobjekt zu zerstören. Das könnte ja eine Atombombe sein. Selbst wenn die NORAD-Menschen die Bombe nicht rechtzeitig zerstörten, sie bräuchten sich keine Sorgen zu machen. Sie würden jeden Atomkrieg überleben. Innerhalb von 30 Sekunden lassen sich die 20 Tonnen schweren Stahltüren der Anlage schließen. Es gibt nur einen Eingang und einen Ausgang. Die Druckwelle einer Atombombe würde ungebremst durch diesen Tunnel fegen. Doch nicht das eigentliche Zentrum treffen, denn die Türen liegen seitlich versetzt. Auch von unten ist die geheime Kommandozentrale perfekt geschützt. Die gesamte NORAD-Zentrale ist auf diesen riesigen Sprungfedern gelagert. Insgesamt 1319 Stück. Sie sollen die gewaltigen Erdstöße einer Atomexplosion abfedern. Riesige Generatoren sorgen für Strom. 30 Tage könnten die Militärs hier, abgeschottet von der Außenwelt, überleben. Sollten die Generatoren ausfallen, sprengen 3500 Batterien an. Jede einzelne könnte ein Einfamilienhaus mehr als einen Tag lang versorgen. Riesige unterirdische Wassertanks machen die NORAD-Zentrale komplett unabhängig von jeder kontaminierten Quelle der Außenwelt. Gebaut wurde diese Festung vor fast 40 Jahren, zu Zeiten, als die Supermächte bewaffnet bis an die Zähne waren. Ein Atomkrieg war durchaus denkbar. Damals glaubte man noch, dass es bei einem nuklearen Krieg auch Sieger geben könnte. Das war die Geburtsstunde von NORAD, die erste Zentrale, ein altes Krankenhaus. Doch sie wäre im Ernstfall verglüht. Dann die Idee, eine versteckte Basis in einem Berg. Der Platz war schnell gefunden, Cheyenne Mountain. Im Juni 1961 begannen die Arbeiten. Es entstand eine riesige Höhle. 700.000 Tonnen Granit sprengten Experten aus dem Berg. Dabei durfte die Struktur der Felsen ja nicht zerstört werden. Sonst würde der Berg eine Atomexplosion nicht aushalten. Jede Sprengung musste genau berechnet werden. 2 Jahre und 700 Tonnen Dynamit später waren die Gewölbe fast fertig. 1963 wurden 10 Meter lange Stahlbolzen in den Fels getrieben. Sie sollten den Granit noch dichter zusammenpressen. Doch dann machten Statiker eine Entdeckung. Genau über der höchsten Stelle ist der Berg löchrig wie Schweizer Käse. 3 Jahre Arbeit vergebens? Nein, diese Kuppel hat damals das Projekt NORAD gerettet. Ein Dach aus Beton und Stahl. So groß, dass es draußen gebaut wurde und dann im Berginneren zusammengesetzt wurde. Die Kuppel hält. Auch heute, 35 Jahre später, 11 Jahre nach Ende des Kalten Krieges. Heute arbeiten unter ihr 1500 Menschen 24 Stunden am Tag. Im Inneren von Cheyenne Mountain ist so eine kleine Stadt entstanden. Die friedliche Atmosphäre täuscht. Auch heute ist ihre einzige Aufgabe das Warten auf den Ernstfall. Cheyenne Mountain ist kein totes Relikt aus einer vergangenen Epoche. Hier unten haben die Männer den Finger immer noch am Abzug der Atombomben. Machen Sie einen Fehler, könnte das der letzte der Menschheit sein.
Auch ganz interessant, wie ich finde, die unterirdischen Computersysteme im Cheyenne Mountain erzeugen so viel Wärme, dass dort unten im Winter gar nicht geheizt werden muss.
Lenkraketen. Sie gehören zu den modernsten Waffensystemen der Welt. Sie finden selbstständig ihr Ziel und das mit bis zu 4-facher Schallgeschwindigkeit. Mit ihrer intelligenten Elektronik führen diese Flugkörper Lenk- und Steuerkommandos eigenständig aus. Dadurch treffen sie auch auf große Entfernung genau ins Ziel. Auch die russische Interkontinentalrakete SS-19, Rocket genannt, verfügt über diese Technik. Die Vernichtungswaffe SS-19 soll in Zukunft zivile Aufgaben erfüllen. Die Rocket ist mit ihrer Antriebsleistung in der Lage, Satelliten in bis zu 1000 Kilometer Höhe auszusetzen. Diesen erdnahen Orbit nutzen vor allem Telekommunikationssatelliten. Mitte der 90er Jahre begann die deutsche Firma Eurocod mit russischen Kollegen die Umwandlung der Atomrakete in ein orbitales Trägersystem. Im russischen Plesetsk setzen die Ingenieure die neu konstruierte Ladebucht Breeze zusammen. Die Satellitenanzahl und Größe hängt dabei vom Gewicht ab. Maximal 1850 Kilogramm Nutzlast kann die Rocket in den Weltraum befördern. Nach der Montage wird die mit einer Schutzhülle versehene Oberstufe zum Startplatz gerollt. Hier warten bereits die beiden unveränderten Antriebsstufen der Rocket. Nach dem Aufsetzen der Oberstufe verbinden die Ingenieure die Steuersysteme der einzelnen Stufen. Die Steuerungsabläufe während des Fluges übernimmt dann der äußerst präzise Bordcomputer. Nach 5 Jahren Vorbereitung und einer Investition von über 40 Millionen $, startet das neue Trägersystem im vergangenen Mai zum erfolgreichen Jungfernflug. Mit an Bord der 29 Meter langen und 107 Tonnen schweren Rakete 2 Simulationssatelliten. Sie sollen in 540 Kilometern Höhe ausgesetzt werden. Nach der Trennung der ersten Antriebsstufe öffnet sich in 120 Kilometer Höhe die Ladebucht. Ist die zweite Stufe abgebrannt, übernimmt Breeze selbstständig den Weiterflug zum Zielpunkt. Die Oberstufe ist dafür mit einem Haupttriebwerk und mehreren Rotationstriebwerken ausgestattet. Jede Kurskorrektur ist möglich. Erst wenn die exakt berechnete Position erreicht ist, setzt Breeze die Satelliten frei. Damit Breeze nicht als Weltraumschrott endet, ist die Oberstufe auf einen Wiedereintritt in die Erdatmosphäre programmiert. Breeze verglüht dabei vollständig. Die ersten echten Satelliten sollen im Sommer 2001 ausgesetzt werden.
Bei mir im Studio begrüße ich jetzt Herrn Günther Stammer-Johanns. Sie sind Vorstand der Firma Eurocot. Wie ist man denn bei Ihnen, bei Eurocot, auf die Idee gekommen, aus russischen Waffen auf einmal Trägerraketen zu machen, mit denen man Satelliten ins All befördert?
Zu Beginn der 90er Jahre war der Wunsch in Deutschland ausgeprägt, auch einen eigenen Marktzugang für kleine Träger zu erzeugen. Bis jetzt gab es ja nur die Ariane und Deutschland war reiner Zulieferant. Gleichzeitig kam die Öffnung in Russland und man konnte russische Raketen verwenden zur Zerstörung durch den kommerziellen Betrieb. Das war etwas völlig Neues und wir haben die Gelegenheit genutzt, uns mit einem russischen Partner, der Firma Koneschew, zusammenzutun, um diese Rakete zu modifizieren und rein für kommerzielle Zwecke einzusetzen.
Welche Art von Satelliten kann man damit jetzt befördern?
Wir befördern im Wesentlichen Kleinsatelliten bis ca. 1000 Kilo in erdnahe Umlaufbahnen, im Wesentlichen Wissenschaft, Erdbeobachtung und Telekommunikation.
Ein solches Unternehmen setzt ja gewisse Umwandlungen voraus, sowohl technischer Natur als auch menschlich-struktureller Natur. Was waren denn da Ihre Erfahrungen auf diesen beiden Seiten?
Wir hatten natürlich einen immensen Vorteil. Sie wissen, die Rakete ist eine ehemalige Interkontinentalangriffswaffe, die wir modifiziert haben. Das heißt, wir konnten zurückgreifen auf vorhandene Technologien, die erprobt sind. Die Rakete ist 144 Mal geflogen, davon 141 Mal erfolgreich. Eine sehr manövrierfähige, moderne Oberstufe, einmalig in der Welt, die gleichzeitig bis zu 7 Satelliten absetzen kann. Dieses finden Sie in der westlichen Welt heutzutage noch nicht. In der menschlichen Ecke natürlich sehr wichtig, diese Experten, die dort tätig sind, das sind hoch ausgebildete, qualifizierte Ingenieure, binden wir an eine kommerzielle, friedliche Aktivität und vermeiden dadurch neben der Stabilität in Russland selber, dieser Firma, mit der wir kooperieren, auch eben, dass diese Experten abwandern in unerwünschte Gebiete oder Länder für Zwecke, die wir alle nicht wollen.
Dann Gore, daraufhin die Nachzählung, dann wieder nicht, dann machen Sie es mit der Hand. Das geht natürlich auch nicht. Also wird eine Frist gesetzt, dann wieder aufgehoben. Dann trotteln die Briefwähler nach. Dann kommen wieder die mit der manuellen Masche und meckern. Sie schaffen es nicht. Das freut Bush. Doch das oberste Gericht Floridas segnet die ganze Erbsenzählerei wieder ab. Und das wiederum freut Gore. Doch nur kurz. Den Zählern wächst der Kram über den Kopf. Sie wollen nicht mehr. Wieder freut sich Bush. Bislang wissen wir jedenfalls nur eins. Spätestens am Montag wissen wir mehr. Das Endergebnis, also das Ende der widerspenstigen Zählung. Wahrscheinlich.
1, 2, 3,
4, 5, 6,
7, 8, 9, 10.
Na also, geht doch. Die Amerikaner an sich können zählen. Flüssig und locker kommen sie bis 10. Da kann man fragen, wen man will, zumindest in der Hauptstadt.
1, 2, 3.
In Florida mag das anders sein. Dort ist es bekanntlich warm, der Beach lockt, das ganze Jahr ist Saison und dann ist es schon ein wenig ärgerlich mit der blöden Zählerei, die, das haben wir gelernt, gleich von einer ganzen Kommission durchgeführt wird.
1, 2, 3,
4, 5, 6,
7, 8, 9, 10.
Und so muss man sich im winterkalten Washington gedulden, bis der Sunshine State Florida in der knappen Zeit zwischen Strand und Pina Colada fertig ist mit der ganzen Rauf- und Runterzählerei.
4, 5, 6.
Und dabei wollen wir endlich wissen, wer als Nachmieter von Bill Clinton in die Weiße Villa in zentraler, aber ruhiger Lage einziehen darf. Oh, oh, der Europäer sollte nicht spotten. Das, was hier passiert, ist eine Gefahr für die Demokratie. Weltweit, das sieht der sprichwörtliche Mann oder politisch korrekt auch die Frau auf der Straße ganz klar so. Nein, das ist kein politisches Entertainment.
7, 8, 9.
Um Gottes Willen, hier geht es um den Präsidenten der USA und die sind wichtig. Schließlich holen sie ja bei Olympia immer die meisten Goldmedaillen. Also lasst sie in Ruhe zählen und wenn die Demokratie dabei den Bach runtergeht, dann gibt es als Ausgleich für alle ein Klima wie in Florida weltweit das ganze Jahr. Life is a beach. In diesem Sinne.
1, 2, 3,
4, 5, 6,
7, 8, 9, 10.
Nach Medienberichten konnte Vizepräsident Al Gore bei den Handnachzählungen in Florida Stimmen hinzugewinnen. Heute Abend um 23 Uhr läuft die Frist zur Nachzählung ab. Dann soll zumindest der vorläufige Sieger verkündet werden. Das letzte Wort im Wahlstreit liegt weiter beim obersten Gerichtshof in Washington.
Die Wahlkommission im Landkreis Broward hatte bis in die Nacht hinein alle Wahlzettel mit der Hand überprüft. Über 1000 Stimmen, die zuvor als ungültig galten, wurden nun mitgezählt. Der Demokrat Gore hat bei den Nachzählungen gegenüber Bush 560 Stimmen hinzugewonnen. Der Vorsprung Bushs im entscheidenden Bundesstaat Florida hat sich damit zwar um 2/3 verringert. Die verbleibenden 361 Stimmen Vorsprung sind für Gore dennoch kaum einzuholen. Vor dem Gebäude der Wahlkommission in Broward hatten sich rund 450 Bush-Anhänger versammelt, die den Stopp aller Neuauszählungen forderten. Im Bezirk Palm Beach wird zurzeit noch gezählt. Hier zeichnet sich nach inoffiziellen Angaben ein Stimmenzugewinn für Gore ab. Doch auch dieser wird vermutlich kaum ausreichen, um das Blatt noch zugunsten der Demokraten zu wenden. Angesichts zahlreicher Klagen ist jedoch unklar, ob die neuen Zählungen letztlich gewertet werden. Der oberste Gerichtshof in Washington hat auf Antrag der Republikaner dazu für den 1. Dezember eine Anhörung angesetzt. Republikaner und Demokraten wollen je nach Ausgang das Zählergebnis anfechten.
Heißt der nächste Präsident der Vereinigten Staaten George W. Bush? Er selbst sieht es so und lässt sich in Florida bereits feiern. Auch die Innenministerin von Florida, Katherine Harris, sprach Bush nach dem gestern Abend verkündeten Endergebnis den Sieg zu. Doch die Demokraten mit Al Gore an ihrer Spitze, sie kämpfen weiter.
Ein strahlender George W. Bush am Morgen auf dem Weg zur Arbeit. Noch ist es nicht das Weiße Haus in Washington, sondern nur seine Gouverneursresidenz in Austin, Texas. Aber dass er sich als gewählter Präsident der USA fühlt, daran lässt Bush keinen Zweifel. Eine Unterschrift brachte Bush seinem Ziel wieder ein Stück näher. Katherine Harris, die Innenministerin von Florida, beglaubigte gestern das amtliche Endergebnis. 537 Stimmen Vorsprung für Bush. Damit gewinnt er Florida und die Präsidentschaft. Bei den Anhängern im Bush-Lager verständlicher Jubel. Aber da sind auch noch die Demokraten. Gleich nach Bekanntgabe der Ergebnisse verkündete deren Vizepräsidentschaftskandidat Joe Lieberman die Botschaft: Al Gore und ich werden weiterkämpfen. Wir haben keine andere Wahl.
Vice President Gore and I have no choice but to contest these actions.
Das war gestern. Heute haben wieder die Gerichte das Wort. Die Demokraten wollen das Ergebnis anfechten. Tausende Stimmen, so ihr Argument, wurden nicht gezählt. Noch am Nachmittag soll die Verhandlung in Florida beginnen.
Eberhard Pilz in Washington. Wie groß ist denn die Chance für Al Gore, dass sich das Blatt doch noch einmal wendet?
Schwer zu sagen, wer bin ich, wenn gleichzeitig ganze Heerscharen von $700 pro Stunde Anwälten eine juristische Schlacht inszeniert haben, wie es Amerika noch nie in seiner Geschichte erlebt hat. Al Gore streitet dieses Ergebnis an. Die Gerichte werden, wie gesagt, heute Nachmittag die erste Klage dagegen entgegennehmen. Also theoretisch kann sich das Blatt noch wenden. Theoretisch könnte er noch gewinnen. Aber was wäre das für ein Sieg? Wie wäre der politisch auszuwerten, wenn er sozusagen per Zwang durch die Gerichte erzielt wäre? Denn also der würde Präsident, der die besseren, schlaueren Advokaten gehabt hat. Politisch wäre das ganz schwer für ihn. Aber theoretisch möglich ist es.
Das wäre meine nächste Frage gewesen. Welche Konsequenzen hat es denn für die Demokratie in Amerika, wenn diese Wahl nun doch mehr oder weniger von den Gerichten entschieden wird?
Also nach allen Umfragen, die wir im Augenblick hier vorliegen haben, sind die Amerikaner ein geduldiges Volk. Sie sind bereit gewesen zu sagen, und dann wird ausgezählt und nochmal ausgezählt und nochmal ausgezählt. Das soll schon alles seine Richtigkeit haben. Mit dieser Prozedur waren sie mehr oder weniger einverstanden. Das hat noch nicht gekratzt an ihr Demokratieverständnis. Wenn es aber jetzt weitergeht und die Gerichte praktisch die Entscheidung in die Hand nehmen und der nächste Präsident tatsächlich per Gerichtsbeschluss ernannt werden würde, daran würde die amerikanische Demokratie und das Verhältnis von den Bürgern zu ihrem Staat und zu ihrem Präsidenten durchaus Schaden nehmen. Das sagen alle Umfragen. Das wollen sich die Leute eigentlich gar nicht vorstellen, dass die Advokaten nun auch noch diesen Bereich des öffentlichen Lebens unter sich aufmachen.
Vielen Dank, Eberhard Pilz.
The mission is scheduled to last 11 days and will feature 3 spacewalks after the orbiter has docked to the International Space Station. This is an exciting mission for these astronauts. They will be the first astronauts to actually be greeted by a crew that is currently living on the International Space Station. Astronauts are being directed into their parking spots at the shuttle landing facility. And this first plane is Commander Brent Jett, who is flying the aircraft, and he is being backed up in the second seat by Carlos Noriega. The second plane coming in is being piloted by the shuttle pilot for mission STS-97, Michael Bloomfield, and flying behind him is Mark Gurneau. And in the third aircraft, is Joe Tanner, one of the mission specialists on this mission as well.
Good afternoon. Sorry we're a little late. We had a little aircraft problem at Ellington. We would have been exactly on time except for that. We're real happy to be here today, and we really appreciate y'all coming out. We know there's another big story going on in Florida today, and we're happy that you're interested in the space program. We were talking to Shep and Yuri and Sergey, the Alpha crew, yesterday, and they were very anxious for us to get up there. They're real anxious to get P6 and the power on board. And I reminded Shep, I said, well, Shep, you know there's hundreds and hundreds of things that have to go right this week for us to launch on Thursday. And he understands that. He's flown on the shuttle before. But what gives us the confidence to think we are going to get airborne this week is we've got a great launch team here. We know they're going to work real hard this week when they pick up the count tonight. We're confident in the folks here at KC and the jobs that they've done so far getting the vehicle and the payload ready. So we're anxious to get up there and deliver some power to the station and see the Alpha.
Lift off in just under 9 hours from now. It is carrying a large payload that will provide vital power for the International Space Station. Our space correspondent Miles O'Brien joins us with details from the launch site at the Kennedy Space Center. Miles.
Marina, it's a beautiful day to fly a shuttle. The weather here nearly pristine. They're saying 90% chance that the weather won't be a problem today. But right now, however, NASA has a small problem with a loose bracket, not on the space shuttle, but on the so-called orbiter access arm, the jetway, if you will, which allows the astronauts to walk from the top of the launch gantry into the space shuttle. The closeout crew that was doing some final inspections noticed a loose bracket. If that bracket were to come loose during the launch, it could cause some damage to the shuttle. So you want to either remove it or tighten it before the shuttle flies today. So instead of fueling it up as they should be right now, they're trying to get a big crane out there to reach that orbiter access arm, fix the problem so hopefully they can fly. They've got about 2 or 3 hours of margin in the fueling time to allow that to happen. It's sort of 50-50 as to whether they can accomplish it in the time allowed. Whenever that occurs, whenever this launch occurs, whether it's tonight or perhaps 24 hours subsequent to the scheduled launch time, this crew has a big task ahead of it. It's the biggest piece so far of the budding International Space Station. The launch is still officially scheduled for 03:06 GMT. That's 10:06 Eastern Time tonight here from the Kennedy Space Center. But as we just told you at the top here, there is a problem, kind of a small problem, but small problems can lead to big problems when you're dealing with spacecraft. A small bracket, which NASA will attempt to either tighten down or remove entirely. A bracket that might come loose during launch might damage the shuttle, and thus, until it is rectified, NASA will not give the go-ahead to fuel up the shuttle, will not give the go-ahead for launch today. We will keep you posted on that. Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
This may be the most hotly contested U.S. presidential election in history, but there's one thing both sides can agree on: flags. The more, the better. Jeannie Moose salutes this year's favorite backdrop.
Interest in the election may be flagging, but the flag itself isn't. In the words of Jay Leno,
the guy with the most flags wins.
Right after the election, George Bush appeared with the Texas flag, but But since then, it's been the Stars and Stripes forever.
And God bless America.
The flags are multiplying like rabbits.
Good evening.
Dick Cheney showed up flanked by 14 flags. Old Glory was in her glory.
Good afternoon.
It is definitely sending a signal. I mean, the signal is getting so strong. I'm waiting for them now to get out semaphore flags to sort of signal to the audience, we won, we won, we won.
Photographers weren't complaining.
I like it better. It gives us a little bit more to work against instead of just a static blue background.
And comedians weren't complaining either.
I can appear presidential. That's what I've done. According to most projections, by the end of the week, one of these men will appear in front of 317.64 flags.
At a briefing room shared by Democrats and Republicans, the Democrats contented themselves with one Florida state flag and one U.S. flag. The Republicans arrived with about 10 flags, complete with eagles. Asked if there were a Bush-Cheney flag strategy, a Bush spokeswoman merely chuckled. Bush campaign signs feature a stylized flag, and look who's talking. CNN can't resist wrapping itself in the Stars and Stripes. Protesters have been holding flags upside down as a symbolic distress signal, but there's something distressing about the flag count.
Gore speaks one flag, Bush speaks two flags. Then last night, Gore, 3 flags.
Wait a minute. Gore had more than 3 against Cheney's 14. We demand a recount. Turns out the 14 flags arrayed behind Dick Cheney were put there by a decorating company that says it acted on its own. The governor himself has stuck to 2 flags, but with the Gore campaign refusing to raise the white flag, maybe the Republicans should try the Band-Aid approach. Ginny Mo, CNN, New York.
And that concludes this edition of World News. I'm Juanita Phillips in London.
I'm Marina Colby at the CNN Center in Atlanta. Thank you for joining us. World News from Washington is next. We leave you with pictures from Earth provided by the International Space Station.
And we do have live TV now of our astronauts, 5 astronauts in the suit-up room, beginning with Commander Brent Jett, who is preparing for his 3rd mission today. Jett will be responsible for the overall success of the flight and the safety of his crew, and he will fly Endeavour to its link-up with the new docking port on the International Space Station, as well as supervise the deployment of the solar arrays. Pilot Mike Bloomfield, preparing for his 2nd trip into space. He will assist the commander during the rendezvous and approach operations to the International Space Station, as well as operate Endeavour's robot arm during the 3 spacewalks. On one of those 3 spacewalks, or on all of those 3 spacewalks, will be Mission Specialist Joe Tanner, who is preparing for his 3rd flight into space. Joe will be responsible for the operations of the Endeavour's docking system and will join his co-mission specialist Carlos Noriega on the 3 spacewalks during this flight. Mark Gurno, our representative from the Canadian Space Agency. During docked operations, he will use the Canadian-built robot arm to install the large U.S. solar arrays on the station, and he will serve as onboard choreographer during the 3 spacewalks planned for this flight. And rounding out the crew is mission specialist Carlos Noriega, preparing for his 2nd flight into space on board the Space Shuttle. And we have our astronauts departing their crew quarters on the 3rd floor of the operations and checkout building and entering the elevator that will take them down to the ground floor, where they will then enter their astronaut van, or Astro van, which will carry them out to launch pad 39B. And the astronauts are now coming out of the operations checkout building as they make their way to the astronaut van. We have our commander, Brent Jett, leading the rest of the crew, our pilot, Michael Bloomfield, mission specialist, Joe Tanner, Mark Garneau, and Carlos Noriega. And the crew are entering the Astro van, which will carry them out to the launch pad. We expect the crew to arrive at the pad in about 25 minutes or so. Riding along with them, our astronauts are members of the flight crew office, security officer, and other astronauts who will be performing the weather assessment functions for our launch attempt tonight. Astronaut Brian Duffy will be piloting the shuttle training aircraft, and he's riding with them at this point. They'll drop him off in front of the Launch Control Center, where he will then be driven out to the shuttle landing facility where we stage our shuttle training aircraft. And the astronauts are off and on their way to launch pad 39B. And we have a view inside the flight deck, on the flight deck of the orbiter Endeavour, as our commander Brent Jett is being assisted into his seat by closeout team personnel. And now a view from the middeck as our mission specialist Noriega finds his way to his seat.
Step 521, I'd like to do by the clock. You got to go by the clock.
Carlos Noriega is a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Marine Corps, and again he's making his second flight into space aboard Endeavour. Our third member to make preparations to enter the vehicle is our pilot on this mission, Mike Bloomfield.
97 are performed and complete. That's implementation of SAT 92. MPD on the floor.
And we see Mark Garneau making final handshakes as he does indeed kneel down to crawl into the orbiter Endeavour.
MPD, have you loud and clear. Good evening, Joe. Okay, I got you loud and clear also. Good evening, Joe.
He will be seated on the flight deck
TC, OVCC. No OVCC.
next to Joe Tanner.
On board at this time. Copy that. OTCC.
And he'll be seated behind our commander Brent Jett and pilot Mike Bloomfield.
Mission Specialist 1, Houston. I read you loud and clear. Good evening, Joe.
CBRS is on the way. Go ahead. Yeah, CBRS, can you go to 161, please?
NTD SRO 212.
Go ahead, SRO.
Yeah, the range is no-go. We are red. Safety is going to hold us red until they feel comfortable with this transmitter problem from command.
Okay, and if you could, we'll need a brief explanation of that transmitter problem, if you could, please.
Your sites recorded the transmitter going down for less than a second. CBRS brought it to my attention. I passed it up. We found no evidence of that happening from this end. However, safety is uncomfortable with the fact that it dropped.
Okay, and we have a little over 10 minutes left in our hold here at T-minus 9 minutes.
And they're working the problem right now, so as soon as they get it done, I'll get back to you.
Okay, is this a 101 system or?
This is a primary command station.
Okay, and this isn't, you don't have a backup for this system. This one is required, correct?
This is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 9 minutes and holding with about 10 minutes remaining in our scheduled built-in hold at this time. We just heard that there is an issue that's being discussed on the range. A primary command station transmitter had a very brief dropout of information. Engineers are currently discussing that to determine if it's in fact an issue that would keep us on the ground tonight, but at this point looks like engineers are conferring, and there may be a positive resolution to this in the next few minutes. So we will stand by for that information as it comes forward. In the meantime, the Mission Management Team Chairman, Jim Halsell, is in the process of polling members of the management team, determining their readiness for flight. With about 9 minutes remaining in our hold, we are at T-minus 9 minutes and holding.
NTD SRO 212.
NTD, go ahead.
Range is now back green. SRO is go. You have a range clear to launch.
Okay, I copy SRO. Range is green.
Correct.
DVD, to say. Go ahead. Looking for step 1036, payload base, flow rate set to launch. That's firm. All right, we'll take 1034, 5, and 6. Copy. OTC, NTD, step 1040. Copy. MS2, OTC. Go ahead, MS2. Yes, sir. Channel 019, TV power switch to on, ON. That's in rec. And OTC, that's complete. Copy that.
OTC, HTD.
HTD.
Okay, at this time we can give you 1057.
And we have about 6.5 minutes remaining in our scheduled built-in hold at T-minus 9 minutes. We heard from engineers that the range issue, the primary command station, is now fully understood, and it is not a concern for launch tonight. The range have reported in that they are go and ready to support our launch attempt tonight. Over the next couple of minutes, we'll have another couple of polls, one from our NASA test director, Jeff Spaulding, and that will be followed by the...
And attention all personnel, this is the NTD conducting the launch status check. Verify ready to resume count and go for launch. OTC? OTC's go. TBC? TBC's go. PTC? PTC's go. LPS? LPS go. Flight?
Houston flight is go.
Mila? Mila's go. STM? STM go. Safety console? Safety's go. SPE?
SPE's go.
LRD?
LRD is go.
SRO? SRO is go. And CDR? The shuttle crew is go. And I copy. Launch director, NTD. Launch director. The launch team is ready to proceed at this time.
I copy that. Chief engineer, verify no constraints to launch.
Engineer is ready, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. KC, safety mission assurance.
KSC SMA is go.
Copy. International Space Station launch manager.
Mike, the International Space Station processing team is go for launch of the P6 truss.
Copy, thank you, Bill. Range weather.
For Roger, sir, we have no constraints to launch.
Okay, thank you. Ops manager.
Mission management team is working no issues. You have a go to continue the count.
Okay, thank you, sir. Endeavour launch director.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, Brent, it's a beautiful night to fly, so we wish you luck, have fun, and give our best to Shep, Sergey, and Yuri.
Okay, we will. It was an awesome job by the launch team today, making up for that lost time, especially the closeout crew. They were really hustling tonight when we got out here. And before we leave town, the station commander, Bill Shepard, asked me to, on behalf of the Alpha crew, to pass along their appreciation to everyone who's responsible for getting this mission ready to go. They're really looking forward to powering up the station after P6 gets delivered and activated. And the only thing we want to add from the shuttle crew is that we're honored to be part of such a great team, and we're ready to get in the game.
Well, thank you very much for those very nice words. It's our privilege and pleasure to get you on orbit tonight. So with that, NTD, you're clear to proceed.
I copy, launch director.
NTD Houston Flight 212.
Go ahead, flight.
We have a very brief update for TAL runway selection for the crew.
I copy, and you have a go.
Endeavour Houston, we have an update for Zaragoza. Let me know when you're ready to copy.
Houston, we're ready to copy.
And Brent, for Zaragoza now, we'd like short field speed brake, and we show 32%. Touchdown, 2,600 feet. How copy?
Okay, short field speed brake, 32%, touching down 2,600 for the TAL, and we got it up.
Good copy, Brent. NTD Houston flight's done.
I copy, flight. NTD ISL. Go ISL. Up to recorder activated. Copy. And attention all personnel, the countdown clock will resume in 2 minutes, 25 seconds. Out. Copy.
This is Shuttle Launch Control, and as we heard, everything is now green and go for launch tonight. The mission management team, the NASA test director, Jeff Spaulding, and launch director, Mike Leinbach, completed their polls of the various directorates and interests here tonight, and NASA test director Jeff Spaulding is verified that we are ready to come out of the hold here in about 1 minute 45 seconds. That will put us on track for a launch at 10:06 and 1 second p.m. Eastern Time. And we are.
We'll resume in 1 minute.
And we're 60 seconds away from resuming the count of Space Shuttle Endeavour. Launch on mission STS-97. Standing by to come out of the hold.
The countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.
T-minus 9 minutes and counting.
GLS auto sequence has been initiated.
The ground launch sequencer has been initiated. NASA Test Director Jeff Spaulding is about to call for the transmittal of stored pre-launch commands as Endeavour is less than 9 minutes away from launch on a mission back to the International Space Station.
TLT, OTC. Go ahead. Connect essential buses to the fuel cells per your checklist. And work.
T-minus 8 minutes and counting.
Copy that.
Pilot Bloomfield is flipping switches in the cockpit to directly connect the 3 fuel cells to the essential power buses.
GLS's go for OAA retract.
And we are in the process of retracting the orbiter access arm away from the vehicle. This is the walkway used by the crew to gain entry into and out of the vehicle. It can be returned to position within seconds if necessary.
CDR, OTC. Go ahead, OTC. Brett, the last shuttle crew may have had the mojo, but you guys are packing the power to light Space Station Alpha into the new millennium.
Well, thanks. We'll do our best and hope to see you back here in about 2 weeks.
KRPS, OTC. KRPS. Go ahead. Start APU strip shot recorders. APU recorders are running. PLT, OTC. Go ahead. Perform APU pre-start. And work.
And we are at T-minus 6 minutes and counting.
OTC, PLT, APU pre-start complete, 3 gray talkbacks.
Copy.
Pilot Michael Bloomfield reports that the pre-start of the auxiliary power units is complete. APU activation will come up in just a few seconds. T-minus 5 minutes and counting.
Go for orbiter APU start.
And we have a go for APU start.
1 APU start.
Good work.
CDR, we configured heaters.
Good one. OTC CDR, heater reconfig complete.
Copy.
The SRB and external tank safe and arm devices have been armed.
APU start complete, 3 good APUs.
Copy that.
Main fuel valve heaters on the 3 shuttle main engines have been turned on in preparation for launch tonight. This mission carries a crew of 5 who will spend the next 11 days in orbit. They will dock with the International Space Station, perform 3 EVAs, and open the station hatch to be greeted by the 3 current inhabitants. The final test of the flight control surfaces will be conducted now. And final aerial surface checks of the orbiter's wing, elevons, and rudder are being completed. This verifies the orbiter's hydraulic systems. Next, the 3 main engines will be gimbaled as a final test prior to launch. Everything continues to look good. We're at T-minus 3 minutes and counting. All is going well for launch this evening of the Space Shuttle Endeavour on mission STS-97.
Go for LO2 pressurization.
Tonight's launch is expected to be visible to most of the southeastern coastal regions of the United States. And we are completing the purge of the shuttle main engines at this time.
TLP, OTC. Clear caution and warning. Memory, verify no unexpected error.
Copy, no unexpected error. Good work.
The gaseous oxygen vent hood is being slowly retracted away from the top of the external tank.
TLP, that's complete.
Copy that.
This tank holds the 500,000 gallons of super cold liquid fuels that run the orbiter's 3 main engines.
Endeavour, OTC. Close the launcher visors and initiate O2 flow.
Less than 2 minutes to launch.
LS's go for LH2 pressurization.
T-minus 1 minute, 45 seconds. All systems are go. Endeavour is about 100 seconds away from launch.
One minute, 30 seconds.
The liquid hydrogen tank inside the external tank is reported to be at the proper flight pressures. T-minus 1 minute and counting.
1 minute.
Everything is still looking good for launch of Shuttle Endeavour from Kennedy Space Center here in Florida.
This is CNN.
This is a CNN Election 2000 special report. They're already lining up to see history in the making. As the presidential election goes before the U.S. Supreme Court, Florida's most controversial ballots head for court, too, as the state legislature moves closer to appointing its own electors.
I just think it would be a terrible mistake for our country if the Florida legislature and Governor Bush went ahead and did what they said they're going to do.
I know that the Gore campaign would love for me to basically disown my family, but look, I'm going to do what's right.
The Democrats ponder their next step. as some prominent Republicans ponder their next job.
If that question should be posed to me, I think I should answer it directly to the governor at that time before answering it to anyone else.
This is a CNN Election 2000 special report, the Florida vote. From New York, CNN senior analyst Jeff Greenfield.
Good evening. To our international viewers who may be finding this post-election American campaign season puzzling, confusing, baffling, let me offer you the words my father said to me at my very first baseball game, where 22 runs were scored and where 4 players were knocked unconscious by wild pitches. You know, my father said, it's not usually like this. Well, it is certainly not supposed to feature lines outside the U.S. Supreme Court that look like they're giving away tickets to a hot rock concert, nor a spate of lawsuits and political maneuverings in the state of Florida, any one of which could send an earthquake through this already battered political landscape. What we're going to try to do is to make some sense of all this, from courtroom to state house to a ranch in Texas to Washington, and we'll even throw in a space shuttle launch in just a minute. But we begin at the Supreme Court, where tomorrow will bring one of the most extraordinary oral arguments in the court's history. Here with a preview is CNN senior Washington correspondent Charles Bierbauer, who will be one of the very few people actually inside the courtroom tomorrow.
A line for the few available public seats began forming a day before the Supreme Court arguments. The final Bush and Gore legal briefs restated their positions in accusatory terms. Bush, the partisan struggle in Florida today is precisely the kind of chaotic situation that would have been avoided by adherence to the statutory deadline. Bush's lawyers are asking the justices here to overturn the Florida Supreme Court's extension of the time for recounting votes.
The court can give the Bush campaign a very narrow victory by simply saying that they are now resetting the clock back to November 14th. And the contest procedures that Al Gore and George Bush are currently going through in Florida can relate back to that point.
Gore's final brief says Bush seeks not just to run out the clock, but extraordinarily to have the court turn back the clock so that he can declare the game over.
We've explained that the decision of the Florida Supreme Court is precisely within the bounds of what that court is supposed to do. It's about Florida law. It interprets Florida law and is the final arbiter of what Florida law is.
Gore's attorneys also say the possibility of direct legislative appointment of electors by the Florida legislature raises a host of constitutional issues, but they've asked this court not to address the matter of the Florida legislature. In fact, the U.S. Supreme Court does not have to make any decision.
There's still the final word as an interpretation of the law, but they may not have the final word as to who is president. And so in that case, they may dismiss this case as improvidently granted.
Al Gore would not mind that. It would acknowledge things have changed and allow all legal actions in Florida to proceed. Each side, Bush and the Florida State Secretary, Gore and the Florida Attorney General, has 45 minutes to try to persuade the justices. Charles Bierbauer, CNN, the Supreme Court.
Now, we're going to take a short break in our coverage of the Florida vote and switch to another story from the Sunshine State, the space shuttle. We are just moments away from the launch of the shuttle Endeavour. CNN space correspondent Miles O'Brien joins us live from the Kennedy Space Center. Miles.
Jeff, it wasn't too long ago that NASA took a poll of its own. No demands for a recount. They are go for launch here. The Space Shuttle Endeavour poised now a minute and 30 seconds away from its 15th flight, the 6th shuttle flight to the International Space Station. I'm joined by Colonel Bob Cabana, a NASA astronaut, the man who flew the first shuttle mission to the space station. Thanks for being with us. Take us on board. What's going on right now?
Oh, Miles, they've just closed their visors, they've turned on their pseudo-2, and they're waiting to get down here to 30 seconds and get the onboard computers controlling. Watch those main engines light and monitor the gauges as they roar off into orbit.
And briefly, this mission is about bringing electric power to this nation's space station. Tell us briefly.
Space station spreads its wings, 62 kilowatts of power, 240-foot-long solar arrays, the largest ever flown, bigger than the wingspan of a 747.
All right, 50 seconds and counting right now. We're about to go over to automatic computer control of the count. At that point, the computer can shut down the count if something is wrong, right?
Absolutely. Computers onboard control. We get the 3 main engines started, a third of a million pounds of thrust in each one, 6 seconds prior to liftoff. Once all 3 are up and running smoothly, we're on the auto sequence now.
All right. Let's listen to NASA's Bruce Buckingham, followed by Rob Navius, as the launch of Endeavour is upon us, less than 20 seconds away.
T-minus 15 seconds. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. You have a go for main engine start. 5, 3, 2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, providing power to the station as we continue to build our future in space.
Roll program.
Houston now controlling the flight of Endeavour. Endeavour completing the roll. The shuttle now in a heads-down, rings level position for the 8.5-minute ride to orbit. "25 seconds into the flight, Endeavour's 3 liquid fuel main engines beginning to throttle back in a 3-step fashion to 72% of rated performance. That will reduce the stress on the shuttle as it breaks through the sound barrier. Endeavour already 1.5 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center. All systems reported to be in great shape. 52 seconds into the flight, the main engine's beginning to rev up to full throttle, 104% of rated performance.
Endeavour, go at throttle up.
The throttle up call from spacecraft communicator Gus Loria. On board Endeavour, Commander Brent Jett, joined on the flight deck by pilot Mike Bloomfield, flight engineer Mark Garneau of the Canadian Space Agency, and mission specialist Joe Tanner. Seated alone down on the middeck, mission specialist Carlos Noriega. One minute, 36 seconds into the flight. Endeavour 18 miles in altitude, 15 miles downrange, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good auxiliary power units. This view from long-range tracking cameras north of the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center. Standing by for solid rocket booster separation coming up in about 8 seconds.
Bob Cabana, that's a moment that anyone who is involved with the space program watches with some anticipation, those solid rocket boosters separating from the shuttle. That's a critical moment, isn't it?
Miles, it's always a good feeling to get off those solids. And now it's just 3 main engines powering you uphill. It's a smooth ride. Awesome. Unbelievable.
You know, I couldn't help but notice you teared up a little bit there. It's an emotional moment?
You cannot help but have pride in what we do as a nation when you see a space shuttle take off and seeing your friends up there. I've seen a bunch of them and I can't help it.
All right, we're now 2 minutes and 44 seconds into this flight. Let's take a look back at the launch just a few moments ago and give our viewers one more opportunity to see the launch of Endeavour on its 15th flight.
We have booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, providing power to the station as we continue to build our future in space.
Colonel Cabana, what's the crew feeling right there? That's a very rough ride, isn't it?
All those pops and crackles you can hear those in the cockpit. You're being pushed back in your seat. Everything's shaking and vibrating, and you're trying to read the gauges. It's just an awesome sense of acceleration and speed. You can hear it. It's a woo, woo, woo as you accelerate through the atmosphere.
What a ride. The Space Shuttle Endeavour on its way to orbit. It's an 8-minute ride, 8.5-minute ride to orbit. We'll be watching it the next 5 minutes as it continues its main engine ride into space, ultimately on to a 10-day mission to the International Space Station, bringing huge solar arrays to power it for the next 15 years, the beginning of the scientific mission of the International Space Station Alpha. Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center. Jeff?
Thank you, Miles. You'll note that Endeavour was launched in Florida, but was being controlled in Texas. Perhaps there's a political message there.
Go for auto sequence start.
And we have a go for auto sequence start. Endeavour's onboard computers have primary control of the vehicle's critical functions. T-minus 20 seconds.
15.
T-minus 15 seconds. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. We have a go for main engine start. 5, 3, 2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, providing power to the station as we continue to build our future in space.
Well programmed.
Houston now controlling the flight of Endeavour. Endeavour completing the roll. The shuttle now in a heads-down, wings level position for the 8.5-minute ride to orbit. "25 seconds into the flight, Endeavour's 3 liquid fuel main engines beginning to throttle back in a 3-step fashion to 72% of rated performance. That will reduce the stress on the shuttle as it breaks through the sound barrier. Endeavour already 1.5 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center. All systems reported to be in great shape. 52 seconds into the flight, the main engine's beginning to rev up to full throttle, 104% of rated performance.
Endeavour, go at throttle up.
The throttle up call from spacecraft communicator Gus Loria. On board Endeavour, Commander Brent Jett, joined on the flight deck by pilot Mike Bloomfield, flight engineer Mark Garneau of the Canadian Space Agency, and mission specialist Joe Tanner. Seated alone down on the middeck, mission specialist Carlos Noriega. One minute, 36 seconds into the flight. Endeavour 18 miles in altitude, 15 miles downrange, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good auxiliary power units. This view from long-range tracking cameras north of the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center. Standing by for solid rocket booster separation coming up in about 8 seconds. Booster officer here in Mission Control reports a good solid rocket booster separation. Endeavour 32 miles in altitude, 40 miles downrange, putting on a light show for the eastern seaboard as it heads up the eastern seaboard. Guidance has converged, all 3 computers. And the booster officer reports the ignition of Endeavour's orbital maneuvering system engines. That will be a 1 minute 42-second kick in the pants for Endeavour as the shuttle gets an additional lift to orbit to accommodate its 18-ton payload.
Endeavour, 2-engine tail.
Copy, 2-engine tail.
That call indicates that should one main engine fail, Endeavour has enough velocity at the moment to reach a transoceanic abort site in Spain. However, all 3 main engines continue to function as advertised. A good ride so far for the 5-man crew of Endeavour. Three minutes, 15 seconds into the flight, Endeavour 50 miles in altitude, 90 miles downrange. Those 3 main engines gently swiveling to hit a keyhole in space for main engine cutoff at the 8.5-minute mark into the flight. Endeavour's engines draining about a half a ton of fuel per second from that large external fuel tank. Coming up on the point of negative return where the shuttle will be too far downrange and too high in altitude to return to the launch site in the event of an engine failure. All 3 main engines functioning perfectly so far.
Endeavour, Houston, negative return.
Endeavour copies, negative return.
Endeavour on course and on time to hit that keyhole in space for main engine cutoff as the chase is underway to reach the International Space Station Saturday afternoon. 4 minutes, 15 seconds into the flight, 61 miles in altitude, 167 miles downrange. Endeavour's trajectory beginning to flatten out as it gains speed heading to orbit. Aboard the International Space Station, Bill Shepard, Yuri Gudzenko, Sergei Krikalev asleep at this hour. They'll be awakened about 3 hours from now to learn of Endeavour's launch. Almost 5 minutes into the flight of Endeavour. Now 65 miles in altitude, 230 miles downrange.
Endeavour, press to ATO.
Endeavour copies. Press to ATO.
That call indicating that Endeavour could make its minimal orbital targets in the event of an engine failure. However, all three main engines continue to function normally. 3 good fuel cells, 3 good auxiliary power units for the orbiter. Endeavour traveling at about 7,300 miles per hour at this moment.
Endeavour, single engine ops 3.
Copy, single engine ops 3.
Endeavour, and that call up from spacecraft communicator Gus Loria, could reach Zaragoza, Spain in the event of a double engine failure. However,
Endeavour, press to MECO.
Endeavour copies, press to MECO.
Traveling at 9,000 miles per hour right now, 374 miles downrange. Endeavour can now make normal main engine cutoff.
Zab, 104.
Single engine Zaragoza, 104.
Everything going very well, very smooth, very quiet here in the Mission Control Center. 6 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. The crew aboard Endeavour feeling the forces equal to 3 times the effect of gravity. The engines will be throttling back a short time from now, once again shortly before main engine cutoff, to limit the G-forces on the crew to that 3G limit. 6 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight. Endeavour traveling 11,000 miles per hour, 498 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center. The glimmer from the main engine bell still very visible to folks down at the launch site.
Endeavour, single engine press, 104.
Copy, single engine press.
Everything continuing to go very smoothly with the climb of Endeavour to orbit, chasing the International Space Station. 7.5 minutes into the flight, Endeavour's main engines are being throttled down now to limit the stress on the shuttle and its 5 astronauts to that of 3 times the effect of gravity. Endeavour traveling at a speed of more than 4 miles per second at the moment. Less than a minute away from main engine cutoff. Endeavour 720 miles downrange. Flight controllers here in Mission Control, led by Flight Director Wayne Hale, standing by for main engine cutoff, which will be followed a few seconds later by the separation of Endeavour's external fuel tank. Booster officer reports main engine cutoff right on time.
Endeavour Houston, nominal MECO, OHMS 1 is not required.
And the external tank has now been separated.
OHMS 1, not required.
Endeavour ist zur internationalen Raumstation ISS gestartet. Kurz nach 4 Uhr hob die Endeavour planmäßig in Cape Canaveral ab. An Bord sind 5 Astronauten. Sie bringen ein 1,3 Milliarden Mark teures Sonnensegel auf die Raumstation. Es wird gebraucht, um die ISS mit Strom zu versorgen.
Endeavour ist in der Nacht zur internationalen Raumstation ISS gestartet. An Bord das mit 1,3 Milliarden Mark teuerste Sonnensegel aller Zeiten. Es soll die Energieversorgung auf der seit Anfang November bewohnten Station verbessern. Laut NASA wird man das riesige Sonnensegel bei gutem Wetter von der Erde aus sehen können.
Ist in der Nacht zur Weltraumstation ISS ins All gestartet. Das Shuttle hob gegen 4 Uhr deutscher Zeit vom Weltraumbahnhof in Cape Canaveral ab. An Bord der Endeavour befinden sich ein umgerechnet rund 1,3 Milliarden Mark teures Sonnensegel, das die 5 Astronauten an der internationalen Raumstation festmachen sollen. Das Sonnensegel soll die Energieversorgung der Raumstation verbessern. Seit Anfang November leben 3 Astronauten bereits in der Weltraumstation.
They're on board the space shuttle Endeavour, and their mission to generate enough power to make the International Space Station finally habitable. Up until now, it's been too cold for the 3 occupants of Station Alpha to enter parts of the compound. Once the wings are completely unfurled, they'll be the largest man-made structure ever to grace space.
In diesem Jahr ist eine amerikanische Raumfähre auf dem Weg zur internationalen Raumstation ISS. Die Endeavour hob in der vergangenen Nacht mit einem Bilderbuchstart von Cape Canaveral in Florida ab. An Bord haben die 5 Astronauten für die Energieversorgung der ISS Sonnensegel, die eine größere Spannweite haben als ein Jumbojet. Wenn sie in wenigen Tagen angebracht und entfaltet sind, wird die Raumstation dem Betrachter auf der Erde als heller Stern erscheinen.
Das Endspiel hat begonnen. Das Bezirksgericht in Tallahassee ist die erste Instanz im Berufungsverfahren von Al Gore. Gores Anwälte wollen Handzählung in den ausgewählten Bezirken und die Anerkennung nicht fristgerecht eingereichter Ergebnisse. Die Bush-Anwälte sagten eben dagegen, alle Entscheidungen beim Zählen sind doch gefallen in den Canvassing Boards, also in den Auszählungskommissionen. Und solange die keine gravierenden Fehler gemacht haben, ist das, was da geschehen ist, doch zunächst rechtens und nicht anfechtbar. Inzwischen hat der oberste Gerichtshof in Florida die berüchtigten Butterfly-Stimmzettel, die ja den ganzen Protest anfangs ins Rollen gebracht haben, für rechtens erklärt und für unproblematisch. Al Gore läuft also jetzt die Zeit davon. Am 12. Dezember muss das Einspruchsverfahren erledigt sein, sonst ist automatisch George Bush der gewählte Mann hier in Florida. Al Gore geht geschwächt ins Endspiel und damit zurück nach Hamburg.
Einen Erfolg konnten die Demokraten bei der Nachzählung der Stimmen für den Senatssitz des US-Bundesstaates Washington verbuchen. Ihre Kandidatin, die Unternehmerin Cantwell, setzte sich gegen den langjährigen republikanischen Amtsinhaber Gordon durch. Damit sind im US-Senat erstmals seit mehr als 100 Jahren Demokraten und Republikaner mit jeweils 50 Sitzen gleich stark vertreten.
This is Mission Control Houston with the KU-band communication system having been activated. This view aboard the flight deck of Endeavour. Mark Garneau in the foreground, behind him in the pilot's seat, Mike Bloomfield starting his 2nd flight into space, Garneau his 3rd. Garneau made his 1st flight into space aboard the Shuttle Challenger on the STS-41G mission in October of 1984 as the first Canadian ever to fly in space. Bloomfield was the pilot aboard Atlantis on the STS-86 mission back in September 1997, which brought David Wolf to the Mir space station and brought home Mike Foale. Commander Brent Jett now floating into the field of view in the white shirt. Jett beginning his 3rd flight into space. This a rare live glimpse of post-insertion activity by a shuttle crew in orbit.
Sometimes I wonder.
With Friday morning's wake-up call for the astronauts on Space Shuttle Endeavour, there was human activity on board 2 space vessels as the shuttle closed toward its scheduled Saturday afternoon docking with the International Space Station. While the shuttle crew prepared for its first full day in space, Expedition Commander Bill Shepard, Soyuz Commander Yuri Gitzenko, and Flight Engineer Sergei Krikalev finished packing garbage into a Progress resupply ship and then undocked it from the station's Zarya control module, clearing the way for the shuttle's docking to the nearby pressurized mating adapter number 3. The cargo craft will remain in a parking orbit a safe distance from the station until late this month, after the shuttle has departed. As the station crew began to wrap up their workday, mission specialist Mark Garneau and pilot Mike Bloomfield started their day with a checkout of the shuttle's robotic arm, and then used it to take a look at their primary payload, the P6 integrated truss structure. Its 2 solar array wings will generate the power needed to operate all station systems and to run the science hardware in the U.S. lab module, Destiny, scheduled to be delivered on the next shuttle mission in January. The 45-foot tall structure will be installed atop the station's Z1 truss with the help of the robot arm and mission specialists Joe Tanner and Carlos Noriega over the course of 3 planned spacewalks. Friday, they set up systems in Endeavour's airlock and then ran a series of checks on their spacesuits before moving on to laying out the tools they'll take with them into the shuttle's payload bay during those excursions. Meanwhile, Commander Brent Jett checked out the computers and other tools he and his crew will use during Saturday's rendezvous and docking with the station, while Bloomfield and Garneau verified operation of the Space Vision System, which they'll rely on during the coming days to help maneuver the robot arm in areas where they won't have a direct line of sight from inside the orbiter. Friday evening, the commander and the 2 spacewalkers, one a Marine officer, the other a former naval aviator, took a moment to send a message in honor of Saturday's 101st renewal of the Army-Navy football rivalry.
Welcome aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour. I'm Commander Brent Jett, Naval Academy class of 1981, and commander of the STS-97 mission, which is a mission to deliver the first U.S. power module to the International Space Station Alpha. We're currently about 200 miles above the Earth, traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour on our way to rendezvous and dock with Alpha and her crew, which is commanded by Captain Bill Shepard, Naval Academy class of 1971. On behalf of all Navy and Marine Corps astronauts, past and present, we just wanted to say, Go Navy! Beat Army!
Friday night, Jett and Bloomfield completed the day's second jet thruster firing to refine the shuttle's approach to ISS. After their scheduled 7-hour sleep period Saturday morning, Jett and crew will begin closing the final miles to the first ever shuttle docking to an inhabited International Space Station. A Saturday morning wake-up call to the astronauts on board Space Shuttle Endeavour signaled the next important step in assembly of the International Space Station, arrival of the orbiter on its mission to deliver the largest solar arrays ever built. While the ISS crew members prepared their vessel for docking, Shuttle Commander Brent Jett and pilot Mike Bloomfield configured systems on Endeavour's flight deck. At a distance of about 8 miles from ISS, they established communications with Expedition Commander Bill Shepard on board the station.
At Alpha Endeavour, we're just inside of TI, getting ready for the MC-1 burn. Okay, we copy.
During the next orbit, the shuttle inched up on ISS. Jett moved to the aft flight deck to take manual control of his ship as it neared a point directly below the station. With the station crew monitoring from inside the Zvezda module, Jett pulsed the orbiter's thrusters to push Endeavour toward ISS. At a range of 500 feet, Jett maneuvered the shuttle to turn its tail into the direction of travel, and then resumed the slow, methodical approach to the station's pressurized mating adapter number 3, which was delivered by a shuttle crew in October. At 30 feet, Jett paused briefly to confirm the 2 ships were properly aligned and sent word that all was ready, first to spacecraft communicator Shannon Lucid in Houston, and then to Shepard on board ISS.
And Houston, we see that there is not a flyout required, and we're commencing final approach.
And Endeavour, Houston, copies.
Endeavour station keeping at 30 feet, requesting permission to come alongside and dock at TMA-3.
Endeavour Alpha, Romeo closed up, clear to board at TMA-3.
Copy, closing up Romeo, we're commencing the final approach.
Jett pulsed Endeavour's thrusters. The station was commanded to free drift to prevent inadvertent jet firings. And as the 2 vessels flew above the border of Russia and Kazakhstan, from where the expedition crew was launched 32 days ago, Shepard and crewmates Yuri Gidzenko and Sergei Krikalev watched and listened as Endeavour crept up to their door.
16 inches. 8 inches. 2 inches. Contact.
No contact.
Well, capture confirmed. Alpha, free drift. At Alpha, we confirm that. We see your loading lights flashing.
Houston, capture confirmed.
As the leak and pressure checks between the two vessels were completed, the workday for the 3 station crew members wrapped up at just about the time that Lucid informed Jet of the day's other news regarding his alma mater, the U.S. Naval Academy.
And Endeavour, Houston, just a football update. Navy beat Army 30-28.
All right, this turned out to be a pretty good day.
That's for sure. That was an awesome rendezvous and approach and docking.
Yeah, I just hope I saved enough in the forward for Bloomer to get the fly around.
Mission Control later told Jet he had, in fact, saved plenty of propellant for Bloomfield's scheduled fly-around of the station at the conclusion of docked operations next Saturday. After Jet and Bloomfield fired thrusters to test the structural dynamics of the station, Bloomfield helped mission specialist Mark Garneau power up the shuttle's robot arm, which the Canadian astronaut maneuvered to grapple the P-6 integrated truss structure in Endeavour's payload bay. Garneau lifted the structure, which contains the station's first set of U.S. solar arrays, into a position where its temperature can equalize with that of the rest of the station. Saturday evening, mission specialists Carlos Noriega and Joe Tanner reported some difficulty opening the hatch to PMA-3, and Mission Control reported that significant force had been required on some previous flights to open that hatch. Marine Colonel Noriega gave it a try, without success. So his spacewalking partner, former Navy pilot Tanner, took a turn.
And Endeavour Houston, update on the score previously passed to you today. It's now Navy 1, Marine Corps nothing.
After installing electrical grounding straps in the PMA and delivering supplies for later retrieval by the station crew, and taking a peek through the other side of the PMA into the station's Unity module, Tanner and Noriega and their crewmates finished a very full day by reviewing plans for the first of this mission's 3 planned spacewalks, slated to begin Sunday afternoon, when they're to install the P-6 structure atop the station's Z-1 truss and unfurl its 2 115-foot-long solar arrays.
The docking took place on Saturday, 370,000 kilometers above Earth. Once deployed, the solar wings will stretch 72 meters from end to end and 11 meters across. They'll power the space station's future laboratories. A team of astronauts has completed the first of a 4-month tour living aboard the so-called Alpha module.
Angedockt. An Bord der amerikanischen Raumfähre befindet sich das größte Sonnensegel der Welt. Es soll am Sonntag an die internationale Raumstation ISS angebracht werden. Die 3-köpfige Crew wartet schon ungeduldig auf die zusätzliche Energie. Die bislang vorhandenen Segel reichen nur zur Beheizung von 2 oder 3 Räumen. Außerdem soll das Segel ab Januar ein US-Laboratorium mit Energie versorgen.
Es angedockt. Die US-Raumfähre hat ein 12 Meter großes Sonnensegel im Gepäck. Es ist Teil einer Solaranlage, die die 3-köpfige Crew der Raumstation mit zusätzlicher Energie versorgt. Zurzeit können die Astronauten nur 2 der 3 ISS-Module beheizen. Die Solaranlage soll ab Januar auch Strom für ein Laboratorium liefern.
The 5 Endeavour crew members will spend a week at the space station. Their mission to install a giant set of solar space wings. Those wings will be used to provide the power to open the station and power an on-site laboratory. NASA describes the attachment of the solar wings as its most complicated mission to date. The Endeavour crew will spend just 1 day with the 3-man crew of the International Space Station.
Endeavour an ISS angedockt. Die US-Raumfähre hat ein 12 Meter großes Sonnensegel im Gepäck. Es ist Teil einer Solaranlage, die die 3-köpfige Crew der Raumstation mit zusätzlicher Energie versorgt. Zurzeit können die Astronauten nur 2 der 3 ISS-Module beheizen. Die Solaranlage soll ab Januar auch Strom für ein Laboratorium liefern.
The shuttle and its 5-member crew are docked at the International Space Station. They arrived on Saturday, bringing along a massive solar power plant. The crew's job on Sunday is to begin installing the solar panels that make up the power system. During their week-long stay, astronauts plan to make 3 spacewalks to connect the power cables.
Guten Tag und herzlich willkommen. Ich begrüße Sie zu den Nachrichten bei Vox. Der Tag jetzt mit diesen Themen. Gerichtsverhandlungen zur US-Wahl in entscheidender Phase. Astronauten installieren Sonnensegel an ISS. Der Kampf ums Weiße Haus beschäftigt weiter die Justiz. Vor einem Bezirksgericht in Florida streiten Demokraten und Republikaner in diesen Minuten über eine erneute Stimmennachzählung in 2 Wahlkreisen. Doch die Zeit drängt. In spätestens 9 Tagen müssen die Wahlmänner, die über den nächsten Präsidenten entscheiden, bestimmt sein.
Die Verhandlungen in Tallahassee werden von allen amerikanischen Fernsehsendern übertragen. Diesmal ist es kein Skandalprozess, sondern ein trockener Rechtsstreit zwischen Experten, der die Gemüter der US-Bürger erhitzt. Vor dem Bezirksgericht in Florida muss der Vorsitzende Richter Sander Saul über eine Grundsatzfrage der US-Demokratie entscheiden. Zählen alle Stimmen gleich und vor allem, wann gilt ein Wahlzettel als ungültig? Damit eine Stimme gültig ist es notwendig, dass das Loch mit einem spitzen Stift gemacht wurde? Ja, wenn ich meinen Finger über diese Stelle hier reibe, dann spürt man nur eine kleine Einbuchtung, aber kein Loch. Das sollte nicht als Wählerwille gewertet werden. Al Gore erhofft sich von einer Handauszählung der Stimmen doch noch einen Sieg. Schließlich ist der Vorsprung hauchdünn. Wir machen gute Fortschritte. Die Republikaner lassen sich vom Optimismus des Gore-Lagers nicht beeindrucken. Auf seinem Landsitz im texanischen Crawford bereitet sich Bush derweil auf seine Amtsübernahme vor. Wie geht's Ihnen, Governor? Mir geht's hervorragend, wirklich, danke. Sein Schattenkabinett hat Bush bereits gebildet. Jetzt arbeitet der Republikaner mit Parteifreunden aus US-Senat und Repräsentantenhaus bereits an seinen Gesetzgebungsvorhaben für die kommende Legislaturperiode.
Die Sonnensegel der internationalen Raumstation ISS werden sogar von der Erde mit bloßem Auge zu sehen sein. Heute beginnen Astronauten mit der Installation der riesigen Solaranlage, die die Raumstation künftig mit ausreichend Energie versorgen soll. Das US-Shuttle Endeavour hatte sie zuvor ins All befördert.
Das Andocken des Raumschiffs an die ISS verlief in der vergangenen Nacht reibungslos. Per Hand manövrierte die Endeavour-Crew das Shuttle an die Verbindungsluke. Gelungener Auftakt einer bislang erfolgreichen Mission. Doch auf die 5 Astronauten wartet eine schwierige Aufgabe. 3-mal müssen die Männer ihr Schiff verlassen, um die Sonnensegel zu installieren. Die 1,3 Milliarden Mark teuren Geräte sind die teuersten und größten, die jemals für ein Raumfahrtprojekt gefertigt wurden. Die Sonnensegel haben eine größere Spannweite als die Flügel eines Jumbojets. Bei voller Leistungskraft könnten sie auf der Erde 30 Häuser mit Strom versorgen. Energie, auf die die ISS-Crew sehnsüchtig wartet. Die 3 Männer wohnen seit November in der Raumstation. Wegen mangelnder Energie können sie bislang nur 2 der 3 ISS-Module beheizen. Für die ISS-Bewohner ist es der erste Besuch. Allerdings dürfen sie ihre Kollegen der Endeavour erst nach der Installation der Sonnensegel in die Arme schließen. Macht schon mal gründlich sauber, forderte die Bodenkontrolle die Männer scherzhaft auf. Nach NASA-Angaben hat die Endeavour auch Weihnachtsgeschenke für die Langzeitbesatzung an Bord.
Das Manöver lief perfekt nach Plan ab. Mit dem Gepäck riesige Sonnensegel. Sie sollen die Raumstation mit Energie versorgen. Mit umgerechnet rund 1,3 Milliarden Mark sind es die teuersten Geräte, die jemals für ein Raumfahrtprojekt gefertigt wurden. Schon in wenigen Tagen wird die Raumstation von der Erde aus mit bloßem Auge zu erkennen sein. Als dritthellster Stern leuchtet dann das Gefährt am Himmel. Allerdings wegen der hohen Geschwindigkeit gerade mal für 20 Sekunden pro Umdrehung.
The alarm clock in space was blasting Sunshine of Your Love as the Shuttle Endeavour crew began powering up Sunday morning. They'll begin installing a giant set of winged solar panels Sunday. The system will generate enough energy to power the equivalent of 30 homes on Earth. The crew plans to spend a week at the station bringing the new power system online. Stay tuned to CNN for live coverage of the spacewalk. It is scheduled to begin at 18:30 GMT, which is just over 2 hours from now.
I'm Shihab Ratansi from the CNN Center in Atlanta. We're going to bring you live coverage now of a spacewalk to attach an enormous solar panel onto the International Space Station. The crew from the US Space Shuttle Endeavour are about to get out and do this job. Joining us now is CNN space correspondent Miles O'Brien, who'll recently installed onto the set and is also going to talk us through this whole operation. Miles, what can you tell us?
Yes, Shihab. Well, first of all, let's take a look at live pictures from space for just a moment. We'll orient everybody as to what we're looking at right now. You're looking at the airlock from which the two astronauts will be coming out very shortly. We have a telestrator here to help you understand. This is the hatch right here, where you will be seeing them come out very shortly. The two astronauts, Joe Tenner, Carlos Noriega, are inside there right now. For the past 45 minutes or so, they have been breathing pure oxygen inside their spacesuits. It's called a pre-breathe, and anybody who's familiar with scuba diving understands that there is some concern about the bends, decompression sickness, and so what happens is the astronauts go through a lengthy period of time of purging their blood of nitrogen, which could cause them some difficulty as the spacewalk goes on. This spacewalk is scheduled to last some 6.5 hours. It is by far the most critical piece of work which astronauts have attempted outside the International Space Station, now about 2 years old. The heaviest, most complicated, most intricate piece of the space station to date will be latched on top of the space station by these astronauts during the course of this event. Now, of course, they will not be moving it all by their lonesome. The space shuttle, which is equipped with a 50-foot-long robotic arm that's about 20 meters, a little less than 20 meters long, will actually pluck this 35,000-pound item from the payload bay of the Space Shuttle Endeavour and move it upward onto the location where it will sit on top of a truss on this International Space Station. Pictures now switching to Houston. This is Mission Control, and if you look, the person in the red there is the voice you just heard. You may recall her. That is Shannon Lucid, a veteran U.S. astronaut who set the U.S., or excuse me, I should say, the international endurance record for a woman on board the space station Mir about 3 years ago. She is what is called the capsule communicator and will be talking to the crew members all throughout this 6.5-hour spacewalk. So that's the voice you will hear. That's Mission Control in Houston. They're obviously monitoring things very closely. There is a very similar place in the Moscow suburbs of Korolev where a group of Russian controllers are monitoring their side of things, which is the International Space Station. The International Space Station is primarily consists of Russian components to date. The so-called service module, which is the living quarters, was delivered this past summer and is home right now and has been for the past 32 days to a 3-person crew headed by NASA astronaut Bill Shepard and rounded out by Russian cosmonauts Sergei Krikalev and Yuri Gidzenko. This is the first time that a space shuttle has docked at this budding International Space Station with somebody home. In other words, they knocked on the door, somebody was there. Let's take a look at some videotape. Yesterday was a critical day as the commander of the Space Shuttle Endeavour engaged in what is a very intricate bit of precision flying at some 22,000 kilometers per hour. There you see the view. Talk about a room with a view, Shihab. This was shot by the crew of the space station, International Space Station, dubbed Alpha, as the Space Shuttle Endeavour approached. Commander Brent Jett at the controls, working in concert with his 4-person crew, aiming for that point right there. That's the cross. That is the docking target on board the International Space Station. They were able to successfully accomplish the 5th shuttle docking at the International Space Station, and there you get a sense of the speed. This is the object of the moment. That is the device which, folded up inside, contains the long solar arrays. This is the largest structure that will ever be deployed in space. The wings are folded up in there right now. It has the capability of producing enough electricity to satisfy the needs of 10 average homes. There you see some pictures, live pictures, I should say, from the International Space Station. This is a communication antenna, KU antenna at the bottom there. And there you see the base of the docking ring. This is where the space shuttle meets the International Space Station, so to speak, as the astronauts go through their checklist and get ready to step out into the void. Once again, these are some pictures from yesterday as that docking occurred. You really get a sense of the speed there as they travel over the planet, some 22,000 kilometers per hour, but still only inching toward each other at a very, very slow pace. This is prior to the docking. This is what you call the docking ring. There's an absolutely identical ring on board the International Space Station, and that's where the two met. Back to live pictures now as Carlos Noriega and Joe Tenner continue their checklist of procedures to get ready for this spacewalk, some 6.5 hours long. Anyway, that 50-foot robotic arm, some 20 meters long, will pluck that device that you saw out of the payload bay, plop it on top or get it near to the place where it should reside, and literally operating blind, Canadian astronaut Marc Greneau will send that device down to the place where it belongs, some 35,000 pounds worth. While he's doing that, the two spacewalkers will be on either side, giving him visual guidance. Let's take a look at some animation which NASA gave us prior to this mission to give you a sense of what's going to happen here, Shihab. As you can see, the arm slowly will move it. Obviously, this is moving a little bit faster than it will in real life. The spacewalkers, if you could imagine, they're not depicted here, but they'll be right in this area right here, and they'll be literally giving Marc Greneau, as he engages in this delicate task, some visual cues as to where it is. Bring it down, a little to the left, a little to the right, so on and so forth. He obviously wants to do, there you see them depicted right here. They're the spacewalkers right there. This device in total is a $600 million unit. So obviously they want to make sure that it is attached properly and lines up just correctly. We're listening to the checklist. They have not gone on to battery power. That is what signifies the beginning of a spacewalk. And as soon as they go to that battery power, the spacewalk officially begins.
Now, Miles, are the actual astronauts on board the space station at the moment, do they have any part to play in this whole process?
Actually, the astronauts on board the space station are in their sleep period right now. Believe it or not, the astronauts on board the International Space Station are on Russian time because they answer to a control room in Moscow. Now, are they asleep right now? I have a hunch they're looking out the window because they're going to be seeing what's going on. They will have a vantage point that will allow them to see it. We should point out that the hatches between the two large craft are not opened. And the reason goes back to what I was telling you about the bends. The cabin atmosphere inside the space shuttle is deliberately reduced during the week that they will be conducting a total of 3 spacewalks, once again to help alleviate the potential problem of the bends. Meanwhile, inside the Space Station Alpha, the pressure remains as it is normally. As a result of that pressure difference, they cannot open up the hatches until the end of the week. So here they have their first visitors in a month's time. They can't even open the door to them until Friday.
And once the solar panels are installed, of course, there to give power to the International Space Station. But what is the International Space Station actually doing up there anyway?
Well, that's a very good question. There's a lot of people that would tell you it has a lot to do with science and growing things like protein crystals, which may one day lead to better drugs. I would submit to you that this space station has a lot more to do with geopolitics and allowing countries to come up with ways of working together in the post-Cold War era. The fact of the matter is the Russians and the Russian space program is desperately in need of hard currency, and were it not for this particular program, would be really at the end of the rope, so to speak, perhaps thinking about going out of the manned spaceflight business. As we know, the Russian space station Mir, about to celebrate its 15th anniversary in orbit, is getting close to the point where it will be deorbited, and that'll be a sad day for the Russians, who are obviously and rightly proud of their manned space program. This partnership has enabled them to think about moving onward in the future, even though they have some economic realities which would make it impossible otherwise. So the space station is about that, and it's also about figuring out ways for human beings to live in space for long periods of time. If there is ever to be a mission to Mars, a trip which would take many, many months of time and weightlessness, scientists, medical experts need to understand fully what is going to happen to those crew members during that long mission. If they get to the surface of Mars and they're too weak to do any work, what's the point?
But as things stand, is the mission to Mars actually going to go ahead? I thought President Clinton
There's nothing formal right now.
Right.
This is something that has been talked about for many years, and really, quite frankly, there's no political will to do so. It's an expensive proposition, many hundreds of billions of dollars, potentially, and it's not the kind of thing that NASA or any space agency can unilaterally propose. It has to come from leadership on high. If you hearken back to the days of Apollo, it was President Kennedy's vow to make it to the moon by the end of the decade. of the 60s that made that possible. Until the president stands up and says we're going to Mars and we're going to do it in a matter of a few years, it's not going to happen.
So, I mean, at the moment then, it's basically what, $100 billion worth of diplomatic project.
Yeah, it's an expensive proposition, isn't it? And most of it is funded by NASA. It's interesting because when it was originally proposed, as we go out of signal there for a moment, there's live pictures once again from Endeavour. When it was originally proposed, the Clinton administration indicated to us that the partnership with the Russians would save money. Well, it has done no such thing. The Russians have been significantly delayed in building some key pieces of this space station. Those delays have cost money. They've had to be bailed out by NASA along the way as they've run out of hard currency. So it's an expensive proposition. It's a difficult thing at times for NASA to defend it, given the fact that there are other pressing needs right here on the ground.
Meanwhile, I think we have some tape now of the actual helmet cams that are going to be used for the spacewalkers. This is a new thing?
Here's a little feature we need to tell you about. This is the helmet that the two spacewalkers are going to be wearing. I'll call your attention to these points right here. Right in this area, there's the floodlights, and there's a series of camera lenses, a total of 3 lenses. You'll see them right there. Wide angle, medium, and more telephoto. These cameras are outfitted with a transmitter that will make it possible for the helmet cam, as it were, to transmit live pictures during the course of this spacewalk. This is unprecedented in the history of the Space Shuttle program, the first time we've seen a spacewalker's point of view as he or she conducts his business. Now, some of this is going to be, quite frankly, a little bit of fun for us to watch, because we're going to be seeing these solar arrays, these huge 70-meter solar arrays unfurl, the largest structures ever unfurled in space, with a astronaut looking down upon them, the shuttle beneath, and then the Earth beneath there. But the reason that NASA is doing this is a little more of an engineering reason. As the space station grows and the astronauts get farther and farther away from the space shuttle as they do their business, it's very difficult for NASA to see where they are and what they're working on. If they run into a snag with a certain widget or bolt and they have a hard time describing it, this could serve them well. They could send down a picture to an engineer. A problem could be solved in a much faster period of time.
So eventually, how many people are expected to be living on the space station?
Well, the crew is supposed to ultimately get up into the 6 or 7 range. It's supposed to have the volume of a 747 jumbo jet, and all this should happen in about 6 years' time. Given what we've seen so far, I would take everything you hear with a bit of a grain of salt, because this is a very far-flung project. It requires a tremendous amount of coordination on the ground. As many of the engineers have told me, quite frankly, it was easier for the U.S. to go to the moon during the Apollo days than this project has been, because of the logistics of dealing with 16 nations, building separate components in separate places, and then in some cases having them see each other for the first time in space. It's a tremendous amount of coordination. It taxes them in many ways, and the project is fraught with, well, engineering peril, for sure.
It has taken quite some time to get to this stage of the International Space Station. When was it supposed to actually have been completed? I mean, is it behind schedule at the moment?
Yes, it's behind schedule. Its first component was launched 2 years ago. That was a Russian piece, sort of a space tugboat, if you will. And then there was a significant delay as the living quarters, which the Russians had built, the so-called service module called Zvezda, or Star, was delayed significantly because of the Russian financial issues. That has held it up by 2.5 years or more now, and they are behind schedule as a result of that. But as you look down the road and you start adding up all the space shuttle missions, some 35 shuttle missions ahead over the next 5 or 6 year period, the potential for delays is great. Not only just waiting for the hardware, even though the hardware is kind of built up during this delay period of time, but as you start extrapolating out and figuring out how many shuttles can reasonably be flown year after year after year, it's going to take a lot longer than they have been saying, I believe.
And what else does need to be done as these go on?
Well, the next big piece, excuse me, in January is the U.S. laboratory. Destiny is what it's called. Excuse me, and that cannot happen, of course, until these solar arrays are there, because that will provide the power for the lab. That laboratory is the scientific heart and soul of the space station. Excuse me, Shab. And it will be up in January. That's the next significant piece. Shortly thereafter, they'll start adding on pieces and scientific pieces, and ultimately a U.S. habitation module, which will come 6 years from now.
Right, and just for those of you who are just joining us now, we are watching live pictures a spacewalk, which we're expecting to happen in a few minutes, where astronauts from the Space Shuttle Endeavour will attempt to affix a solar panel to the International Space Station. And we expect that to happen any moment now. And we'll have, as we've seen earlier, head cams to capture all the movements and the intricate procedures that are going on. Miles, though, I mean, it is an international space station. Has international cooperation been harmonious throughout this whole period?
No. In a word, no. It's been very difficult. In particular, the relationship between the U.S. and the Russians has been a rocky road, to say the least. I mean, we're talking about a pair of former adversaries who, for many years, in the heart of the Cold War and the space race, were trying to, quite frankly, beat each other's brains out in space and elsewhere. And it was very difficult for them to come to terms with the concept of working together. Not only did they have the old rivalry that they had to overcome, but they come at the space flight process in entirely different ways, diametrically opposed ways. The Russians have a tendency to build technology and stick with it. The Soyuz rocket, which they use as their primary launcher for human beings, is essentially the same design as the first ICBM that they flew in the mid-50s. Basically 40 and 45-year-old design, still flying astronauts. If it works, they stick with it. NASA, on the other hand, tends to go at it from a much more technologically advanced approach. They're constantly looking for new, perhaps more complicated, more innovative, more advanced ways to do things.
Having said that, though, isn't this a bit of a hangover from the old way that NASA used to do things, which are heavy infrastructural projects in space? I thought they were moving to smaller operations.
Well, they are. They're moving to smaller operations. That is true, and that is by virtue of the fact that their budget has been flat or diminished, if you count inflation, for many years. But nevertheless, the U.S. approach, and I think this is a fairly deep-seated cultural issue, the U.S. approach is to go for new things. It's a disposable. We could get into some philosophical issues here, but it's a disposable.
By the looks
society.
of things, we might have to.
The way it's going right now, they see. I haven't quite heard. Let's listen to James Hartsfield for 1 second.
Travel to this location and provide visual cues while Canadian astronaut Mark Garneau lowers the truss structure, aligns it using Endeavour's mechanical arm.
There's good. That's good. You look great.
All right, that was the voice of James Hartsfield, who is the public affairs commentator.
Commentary here sounds like they've double tethered themselves to their tether reels, and so now Carlos is ready to pass out the crew lock bag and begin their sortie here.
All right, and that was the voice of Leroy Chow, who is a NASA astronaut and was a spacewalker on the last mission.
Time you go out, first EVA, it really feels differently than the water, of course, not having the water viscosity, not having buoyancy to fight. And but you very quickly set your gains, and Carlos will quickly adapt and learn how much force he needs to put in to move around.
Now, what he was referring to there, Shihab, is that the astronauts spend approximately 10 hours in a giant pool for every hour they spacewalk. That's where they do their training. The big difference, of course, in a water tank is that there is resistance from the water as they try to accomplish their tasks. It's very different when you get into space.
Endeavour in the station now across above the
lightning strikes right in there. Wow. But Carlos Noriega is on his first spacewalk. Joe Tanner is a veteran spacewalker, having accomplished several spacewalks during the second Hubble repair mission a few years ago. He says in many ways the task at hand. All right, here's our first images of them. This is a still image which is sent down. And this appears to be Joe Tanner. The way I can tell that is Joe Tanner has stripes on his suit.
You can see the
and
tether reels there, and you see the big large hook.
This is the tether reel they're referring to.
Tether that we attach to that tether reel. You know, NASA's philosophy, of course, is being one failure tolerant. And in case a hook fails or a tether actually breaks, we still have one that attaches the astronaut to the spacecraft.
I don't know if you saw the glove there for a moment, Shihab, but that glove is a rather expensive item, $10,000 glove, which they all wear, and which is one of the few items that is custom fitted for each astronaut. The rest are modular and sort of off the rack, if you will.
From a television camera mounted on the helmet of a spacewalker.
So once they actually get out, then, I mean, how long will the operation take?
Well, it is the timeline, which I have in front of me, says 6.5 hours, but those timelines generally
Endeavor's currently
allow for a little bit of
continues north on a course that will take it across.
It's hard to predict sometimes how long things are going to take. Their suits will last them for 8 hours plus, and some of the longer spacewalks have extended into the 8-hour range. And these suits, which are multi-million-dollar units themselves, some $20 million for these suits themselves, with 8 layers of essentially the same material used in bulletproof vests to protect them against the possibility of a micrometeoroid striking them, which could, of course, be potentially devastating. These suits have the supplies for 8 hours plus a contingency supply of oxygen should something drastic happen and they have to get back quickly. They have a little drink bag in there that allows them to refresh themselves. Obviously, they get a little bit thirsty. Some of the astronauts have essentially food sticks that they nibble on. Others do not. And of course, they have to wear what amounts to diapers during the course of a spacewalk, as nature will call.
Which I'm sure everyone secretly wants to know how
yes,
that all
well, we had to dispense with that and get it over with.
And while they're attaching the solar panel, are they actually still sort of clambering over the space station, or are they actually floating in midair?
Well, they're constantly attached to something. They have what's called a two-tether protocol. Here's a helmet cam shot. You see the gloves right there in the lower part.
These views of their work.
And you see here, this is the tethers that are attached to long guy wires on the International Space Station. They constantly have 2 tethers attached so that when they, if anybody who's a rock climber is familiar with this, anytime there's an attempt to move anywhere, the tether is attached again, and there's always a connection to the space station. The concern here is that if they were to break free and they were having a spacewalk outside the shuttle could come in and pluck them. But the space station doesn't have the nimbleness to go grab them if that were to happen. And that could obviously be a problem which you would not want to conjure up. And so, in addition to the 2-tether protocol, they have tiny little rocket packs which would allow them to steer themselves back to safety should they become freed up from their tethers. They're very careful to keep those tethers attached, but it's also nice to have that backup of that rocket pack. Let's listen to Leroy Chow for a minute.
Also, going out EVA on the station was also a lot different visually than going out and doing DTOs in the payload bay. You know, actually holding onto a handrail on the Unity node there and hanging over the Earth was really quite an experience. And similarly, being moved around on the arm, the robot arm, being suspended with none of the spacecraft in my peripheral vision and just watching the Earth zipping by was almost a surreal experience.
And can you verify complete with the post egress?
Now, Carlos, I heard you guys call out everything on the airlock egress cue card. I heard you say you got the Velcro straps, and that was the last thing.
Okay, thanks.
What they're talking about there, airlock egress, is fairly self-explanatory. The airlock exit is what they're talking about. There's a specific checklist that they go through, checking for leaks, making sure their suit is working. All of that apparently is at the latter stages of where they are in the spacewalk right now. Very shortly, they will begin the process of the installation of what is known as the
cabin assisting.
Hang on one second. This is James Hirschfield. There you go. There's our first
assisting
shot
Tanner
of an
Noriega
astronaut
is Commander Brent
creeping
Jett.
into view there.
At the controls of the robotic arm is Canadian astronaut Mark Garneau.
Okay, you can temp throw the crew lock back there. All right.
That's Joe Tanner, who is...
and assisting Garneau is a pilot to Mike Bloomfield.
I have to tell you guys, this WVS is really cool. Figured it would be. Okay, hold up right there, Carlos. All right.
WVS is the acronym for the helmet camera, the wireless video system, as it's called.
And Shihab, whatever it is, it needs an acronym.
Yeah, you see, well, you just saw Joe coming up the left side of the stack there, and that brings back a lot of memories for me, climbing up onto the Z1 there.
every now and then when you lose the full motion picture, you're going to get these still images, which they are able to send down. They come down about every 30 seconds.
Switch,
sort of like a
duties
slideshow from space.
Garneau operating the robotic arm until the P6 truss.
As you can see, the space shuttle right there on its 43rd orbit over the Russian landmass.
Position as the intravehicular crew member.
We think probably we'll have to
assisting with the choreography from inside the cabin. Garneau will take over for Jet.
You'll have to execute message 47.
Copy.
Once again, shots from Mission Control, Shannon Lucid, the so-called Capcom. It's a bit of a misnomer, Shihab. Capsule communicator is what that is. That goes back to the earliest days of the space program, when in fact the space craft were capsules. No longer do they use capsules, but they still have a Capcom.
Now, when we lose images, moving images of this process underway, are Mission Control also losing it?
Yes, they're sharing with us whatever they're seeing. Essentially, what's happening as they go around the globe and they take a lap of the Earth every 90 minutes. They have a satellite dish which points at satellites, and there are spots on the globe where they can't quite see it, or the orbiter is in a certain orientation which does not allow that satellite transmitter to actually see the satellite. And that's exactly what you're seeing there. So when that happens, they'll send us a picture of Mission Control. This is an animation, and this is an accurate rendition of where everything is. Out toward this direction is the International Space Station. This is the docking area where the shuttle has come in. And then above it, attached to the robotic arm right there, is this huge truss and solar array assembly known as P6. So what that is telling you is that the Canadian astronaut Marc Garneau has moved the P6 truss and the solar array package to a position right above where it is to be latched on, and it is now up to the spacewalkers to get up to that point and guide that process, guide the bolts and nuts together, and tighten them down and get that truss in place. Once that is done, they begin the process of connecting a series of connectors.
Still images from television camera views mounted on the helmet of the spacesuit.
You see the gloves there, right there. This is obviously is the spacewalker point of view camera. Hard to tell where they are on the space station right here. Oh, and that's a tether reel right there, Shihab. That's one of the cables which attach them to the space station or the shuttle are reeled up inside there. They have two of those, as I said before, attached them. And then right here, if you look right there, you can see a little space shuttle on there. That's their checklist. And it's attached to the cuff. They call it a cuff list, if you will. And they can literally open the pages there and see where they are on the checklist. They don't have to rely on that completely because they have a crew member inside the Space Shuttle Endeavour, Mike Bloomfield, the pilot, who has an identical checklist and is keeping them on schedule, telling them, you know, you've got 20 minutes left for this task, you're ahead here, you're behind there, keeping them the choreography in place, if you will. I guess you could call it riding herd over them. There you go. There's that checklist I was referring to, and that fancy glove that's attached there. The glove, which is, as we say, the only thing that is custom-made or individual to each astronaut having certain specifications, if you will, for gloves.
Well, why do we still need astronauts to do all this? Why can't we do this by robot?
Well, you know, it just depends on what your goals are in space. If your goal is purely science, you can make a very strong argument that robotics are the way to go because it's much more cost-effective, and human beings make things more expensive in every way. And in many ways, some pure science can be done robotically more effectively. However, if the goal is to explore and for human beings to press their limits and for human beings to perhaps make their own observations as they might on the surface of Mars, for example, if that is the goal, then you can make a justification for sending human beings into space. You know, the question of water on Mars has come up, and there are some tantalizing pictures which we have seen recently, as you well know, from this past summer, from a satellite which has been orbiting Mars. That question may not possibly be finally settled until somebody actually can go down to the surface of Mars and drill a well. Can that be done robotically? Not yet.
Well, so we're going to break off here, and we're going to take a break and come back with world news. But I think you're going to be staying around and keeping us informed of the progress of this intricate operation up in space. But for the moment, we're going to go for a break, and we'll return with world news and continuing coverage of the spacewalk. Stay with us.
This has been a CNN live event.